I am calling to order today's regular session, which will be immediately followed by a committee of the whole. Today's date is November 17th, 2021, and it is a Wednesday. I want to welcome everyone to our council meeting, in particular, those from the public that are joining us this evening. And if I may take a moment, I just want to say I think participating in council meetings from the public standpoint is a very good way to participate in local government proceedings. But I would also strongly suggest those that are not already involved or so inclined to please look into many of our city boards and commissions. So we could better utilize your skills. You could be in an advisory capacity. You could just do things to continue to make this a better city. So thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Rallo.
Here.
Volin. Not here, sorry. Rosenbarger.
Here.
Scambolari.
Here.
Sims.
Here.
Flaherty.
Here.
Piedmont Smith.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
And Sandberg.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clerk Bowden. We'll do the agenda summation this evening. Approval of minutes. There will be none because we have none ready for approval this evening. Then we'll move to reports. A maximum of 20 minutes is set aside for each part of this section. The first reports we'll seek is that from council members. Next would be a report from the mayor and city offices, which is the comprehensive plan tracking report. Then we'll move to reports from council committees, if any, and then we'll have reports or public comments from our citizens from the public. Then we'll move on to appointments to boards and commissions, if any. And we have items for legislation for second readings and resolutions this evening. The first is Ordinance 21-41, an ordinance authorizing the refunding of certain outstanding sewage works revenue bonds of the city, authorizing the issuance of the city of Bloomington, Indiana sewage works refunding revenue bonds of 2021 to provide funds for such refunding and the payment of the cost thereof and addressing other matters connected therewith. Then we'll move on to the second ordinance, Ordinance 21-42, an ordinance authorizing the refinancing of a certain equipment lease purchase agreement of the city, authorizing the issuance of the city of Bloomington, Indiana General Fund annual appropriation refunding bonds of 2021 to provide funds for such refinancing and the payment of the cost thereof, appropriating the proceeds derived from the sale of such refunding bonds and addressing other matters connected therewith. Then our next ordinance would be Ordinance 21-43 to amend Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Vehicles and Traffic regarding amending Section 15.32.090 to adjust the time of a limited parking zone on 2nd Street, Sections 15.12.010, 15.12.030, 15.16.010, 15.20.020, 15.32.080, 15.32.100, and 15.37020 to reflect the changing of the name of Jordan Avenue to Eagleson Avenue. Sections 15.32.030 and 15.32.080 to add angle parking and no parking zones to Illinois court. Section 15.32.100 and Schedule 0 loading zones to add one loading zone to East 7th Street. And then our last ordinance for second reading would be Ordinance 21-44 to amend Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Vehicles and Traffic regarding amending Chapter 15.32 to add a new schedule for reserved motorcycle parking, Sections 15.37.210 to clarify that the parking services director or designee may sell up to 80 employee parking permits total in zones 4 and 5. Section 15.40.019 to provide that vehicles with accessible decals, placards, or plates may park in accessible parking spaces designated for electric vehicles, whether or not the vehicle is electric or is being charged. And section 115.48.070 to delete the administrative fee for towed vehicles. Then we'll move on to legislation for first readings. The first is Ordinance 21-45 to amend Title 7 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Animals regarding amending Chapter 7.01 definitions, Chapter 7.16 commercial animal establishment permits, Chapter 7.54 fees, and Chapter 7.56 enforcement procedure. And then finally, for first readings legislation, we're here appropriation ordinance 21-05 to specially appropriate from the general fund, public safety, local and tax fund, solid waste fund, cumulative capital development fund, food and beverage tax fund, motor vehicle highway fund, parks and recreation general fund, police pension fund, alternative transportation fund, and the rental inspection program fund expenditures not otherwise appropriated, and to appropriate the proceeds of the solar refunding bonds of 2021, appropriating various transfers of funds within the general fund, public safety lit fund, parks and recreation general fund, alternative transportation fund, cumulative capital development fund, police pension fund, and appropriating additional funds from the general fund, food and beverage tax, rental inspection fund, motor vehicle, highway, solid waste fund, and the proceeds from the solar refunding bonds of 2021. Then we'll move on to additional public comment, where a maximum of 25 minutes is set aside for this section. Then we'll attend to matters of council schedule before adjourning, and then immediately followed by the committee of the whole meeting. I would like to add that members of the public may speak on matters of community concern not listed on the agenda at one of the two public comment opportunities. Citizens may speak at one of these periods, but not both. Speakers are allowed 5 minutes. This time allotment may be reduced by the presiding officer if numerous people wish to speak. Okay, thank you. And we'll move on down through the agenda. We have no minutes for approval this evening. We'll move down to reports and we'll begin with council members. And I will start with, as I see them on the screen, Council Member see myself first, I'm sorry. Council Member Sandberg.
No report. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Scambolari.
Yes, thank you. I just want to express my appreciation to Director of Public Works, Adam Wason. He was a guest at my most recent constituent meeting and participated and led a very engaging discussion on trash and recycling and sanitation. And I appreciate giving up his Saturday and a few minutes of his daughter's soccer game to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Smith.
Thank you, President Sims. I just wanted to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, safe time, safe travels. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Flaherty.
No report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Rosenbarger.
No report. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Rallo.
Yeah, briefly, a little update on the burn aftermath of the burn that occurred at 1213 South High Street about a week and a half ago. The remediation effort, I understand, is about 2/3 of the way completed. And I wanted to commend Chief Moore for his effort round the clock to expedite that work. This is the pickup by the remediation companies of the lead chip debris that was found in the plume area of after the burn. He's done really exemplary work to put the situation right. And as many of you know, we had a bit of an informational meeting, some of the council members and myself last Wednesday evening, and that link should be up shortly on the council's website. I think there were about 100 questions that were elicited from that, and those will be up as well. And those are going to also be on the fire department site for this burn info, which is at bloomington.in.gov/BFD burn info. And the questions will be answered on that site. So one can find them there and go there for answers, as well as updates and news releases on the latest from that work to remediate the burn. So that's all I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rowell. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. I don't have a report tonight, but I did want to just mention that while President Sims was giving the agenda summation, my cat was in the way, and so I may have made him face, and I just want to make sure that it really was the cat, which I try to keep out of my office during meetings, but then the cat will make a lot of noise. So I apologize about that.
Thank you for that clarification, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. I was busy reading. I didn't even notice it. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay, now we'll move on to reports from the mayor and city offices. And tonight we'll hear about the comprehensive plan tracking report. I do believe staff member Beth Rosenbarger is here to report. And I see several people joining us. So Ms. Rosenbarger, if you don't mind, I'll allow you to get started.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay, 1 second. Sorry, this keeps moving on. Okay, so hi, I'm Beth Rosenbarger, Planning Services Manager, and tonight I'm here with the Long Range Planning Team to present data that we have compiled based on recommendations of the adopted comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan describes our community's vision for the future, and the purpose of tracking data is to check our status and verify if we're on the right track. At times, this can be challenging to track when goals are focused on continuous community improvement, as opposed to reaching a certain tangible achievement. But however, we can still gauge if we're en route toward an outcome or if we've veered off trail. So for an example of an adopted goal, I've included goal 6.2, improve public transit, maintain, improve, and expand an accessible, safe, and efficient public transportation system. When we look at that as a goal, I would say this is a continuous improvement goal that we want to keep maintaining, keep improving, and keep expanding. But we'll talk about the format of the comprehensive plan then, and where we have more measurable outcomes as opposed to some of the continuous improvement goals. So the format of the comprehensive plan, which you're all familiar with, outlines goals in each chapter, and each goal has several policy recommendations. And then the comprehensive plan also lists programs at the end of each chapter. Then after that are the outcomes and indicators, which are listed at the end of each chapter. Outcomes tell us if we're moving toward our goals, then we should see this outcome. And indicators are the data we use to measure if we're achieving the desired outcomes. So the outcome describes what we would be experiencing if we have achieved it, and the indicators are ways we check in and measure to see if we're moving toward that. The comprehensive plan has 6 chapters and a land use section. Across the 6 chapters, there are 37 goals and 145 indicators. Last year, we presented data for 13 indicators. This year, we've compiled data for 25 indicators, and we're focusing on presenting 13 of those this evening. The other 12 will be available in a PDF along with this presentation. So we'll provide the combined PDF that will have this year's 25 indicators in it. Last year, we focused on data from chapters 5 and 10 about housing and transportation. This year, we've selected indicators from all 6 chapters. Tonight, you will hear from all members of the long-range planning team. So I'll briefly introduce. I introduced myself. We have Keegan Gulick, zoning and long-range planner, Amir Farshi, long-range planner, and Mallory Rickbile, bicycle and pedestrian coordinator. And now we'll get into the data, and Keegan is up first.
Thank you, Beth. Hey everyone, Keegan Gulick, zoning and long-range planner. This first slide shows median household income based on 2019 ACS data. And the outcome that we're tracking is that income inequality in Bloomington is reduced. And we can see that the average income in Bloomington is around $36.6 thousand. And looking at the different education level groups, we can see that there are definitely different outcomes based on one's education level and how much money they might make. So we can see for the first one that less than high school graduate makes around $16.8 thousand. A high school graduate is $29.7 thousand. Some college or associate's degree, $32.3 thousand. A bachelor's degree, $40 thousand. And a graduate or professional degree is around $55.9 thousand. And this is again based off of 2019 census data. Next slide, please.
The next several slides are about poverty and poverty rates. And so this map is going to just set us up, and I'm going to provide a little context on it. So this map shows us the percentage of population living below the poverty line. The data is from 2019 American Community Survey, and it's broken down by census tract in Bloomington. So in 2019, the US poverty rate was 10.5%. So in the US overall, about 10.5% of households were in poverty. In this map, the areas that are shaded green are at, and the maps that follow are at or below that US rate. And the areas that are shaded yellow, orange, or red exceed the US rate in 2019. This map shows all ages in Bloomington. And what we see here is most census tract, all the census tracts in Bloomington, with a small exception on the southeast side and a little bit snippet in the north central, exceeded the US poverty rate. And it depends on the location as to the amount it exceeds that rate. Now, this is the indicator in the comp plan. Percentage of population living below the poverty line of non-student / adult-led households. I'm going to first push back a little on the title, and that we want to acknowledge that anyone 18 or older is an adult, regardless of student status. But the closest we can get into measuring non-student households is to break it down by age. And this map is showing out of people 25 and older, what percentage of that group is in poverty. And again, we're using the same scale. So the areas in green are at or below the US rate of 2019, which was 10.5%. And the areas in yellow, orange, and red have a higher rate. So anywhere from 10.6% to 80% for people 25 and older living in those census tracts. This indicator is the percentage of 65 plus population living below the poverty line as compared to similar Midwestern college towns. So first on the map, we're just looking at Bloomington. So again, the same scale, and it's showing us census tracts and what percentage of the population that is 65 and older is in poverty. What we see is actually similar to the US in that people 65 and older are the least likely to be in poverty, and that children age 0 up to 18 are the most likely to be in poverty. So for the US rates, Of course, we're still seeing areas in town that have higher rates of people 65 and over in poverty, and those are the yellow areas you can see on the map. In the US, the national rate for people 65 and over in 2019 was 8.9%. So to compare to other Midwestern college towns, first have to decide, is Iowa part of the Midwest? I'm going to go with yes. And then we can't, I didn't have the tools to compare just 65 and over. So the census has done some studies and used the years 2012 through 2016 to look at poverty in college towns or in towns with a large undergraduate student population. So this is only at the county level. Monroe County from that years was at 25% poverty rate for all ages, and they can exclude undergraduates living off campus and undergraduates living on campus, and then the rate changes to about 15%. We see, jumping down 2 lines, something very similar in Tippecanoe County, which is our friend Purdue University, and their overall poverty rate for the city is 21.8%. And then when students were removed, it was 14.7%, so very close. That was the closest community to us. In Michigan, the county Washtenaw that has University of Michigan had a lower overall poverty rate with 15.2% and a lower rate excluding students at 10.2%. And then two counties in Iowa had the lowest poverty rates overall once students were removed, both being at 9.3% and 8.3%.
Hello, I'm Amir Farshchi. The outcome for the next 2 slides is a career pathway and training are engaging residents and businesses. For the indicator, this chart and the next one show the high school graduation rate in Monroe County in 2020. The 2020 overall graduation rate was 86%. The highest 2 graduation rates in 2020 were Hispanic or Latino with 95.7% and Asian with 91.3%. Next slide, please. Among the high school graduation rates in Monroe County in 2020, the percentage of graduation in paid meals group was 91.7%, and the percentage of graduation among free or reduced price meals was 79.9%. The biggest difference in graduation rates we see is between the paid meals group compared with the reduced price meals group in 2020. These categories are based on household income, which means kids in home with higher incomes graduate more often than kids from lower income households. Of course, this is likely caused by many factors other than income, such as family support, monitoring students, expectations, and family responsibilities. Next slide, please.
Hi, I'm Mallory Brickpile, Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator. As an indicator for outcome 2.5, which aims to describe how the city of Bloomington celebrates all forms of difference, the indicator that we're looking at is number of cases investigated and resolved through municipal anti-discrimination laws. The information on this slide comes from the City of Bloomington Human Rights Commission. And this chart shows that the types of cases involving allegations of discrimination since 2010. Race, disability, and sex discrimination were the most commonly cited allegations brought to the Human Rights Commission. But a majority of the cases involved multiple layers of discrimination, whether it be race and national origin or disability and pregnancy. Next slide, please. Looking at these same data through a different lens, we see that discrimination in employment was the most commonly cited reason for cases investigated and resolved through municipal anti-discrimination laws. These data do not include instances where the concern was remediated with support provided by the Human Rights Commission nor the vast majority of cases of discrimination that go unreported. In conclusion, this information, though important to know, is not completely adequate substitution for a more detailed understanding of the complex nature of discrimination and the extent to which a community supports diversity in all forms. Next slide, please.
The next outcome that we're looking at is that detrimental environmental impacts from the built environment are reduced. And the indicator is that to change policies and programs that encompass new green building codes and practices. So under the old UDO adopted in 2007, sustainability incentives were only available for the subdivision of land. If a subdivision met certain criteria, such as improved stormwater drainage, they could receive reduced setbacks or lot sizes in their subdivision. But under the new UDO adopted in 2020, next slide, please. There are more incentives available for developers to utilize. For example, if a project meets certain criteria, such as installing solar energy, improved building efficiency, or stormwater drainage, they can receive a taller building height or reduced bulk requirements. And while there are certainly more that can be done in terms of sustainability, I think that this is an example of us following and meeting the goals of the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please.
For outcome 3.3, which reads green space, specifically tree canopy coverage, has increased, we see that between 2008 and 2018, Bloomington's tree canopy cover decreased by less than 2%, or 243 acres. It is the highest category of land coverage in Bloomington at 38%. Impervious surface is second at 34%. Interestingly, the urban tree canopy assessment does provide guidance and indicates that places to build greater canopy coverage should be located in areas of the highest population density and utilizing socio-demographic and economic data to guide placement. Next slide, please.
The outcome for this slide is water consumption has been reduced. This indicator is for water loss from the Bloomington Utilities Department from 2016 to 2020. The data is just for utility-owned infrastructure, like water loss within the system pipes. The data is not for the customer side of the water meters. Based on the chart, the maximum volume of water loss was 1.37 billion gallons in 2020, and the minimum was about 1 billion gallons in 2018. For reference, Lake Griffey holds approximately 417 million gallons of water. Next slide, please.
This indicator is connected to the outcome. Air quality is maintained at a high level and our carbon emissions are significantly reduced. And the indicator says that tracking greenhouse gas emissions indicate that our community is emitting fewer greenhouse gases over time. And this comes from the City Climate Action Plan, and it's sort of just a line graph. What we see on the left is that 2 points from 2008 and 2018 show that the city is emitting fewer greenhouse gases over time. When you continue on the right, the blue line on the top shows that over time we're expected to continue to reduce, though in order to be on track to be carbon neutral, the orange by 2050, the orange line shows that path based on adopting the actions of the Climate Action Plan.
This indicator is looking at the number of jobs accessible within a 45-minute transit commute. And the outcome that we're looking at is improved access of neighborhood housing to community amenities, employment, and essential services. So this map is showing us how many jobs are accessible from each block group to all other block groups. So how many jobs are accessible from one block group to all other block groups. And this data comes from the EPA's Smart Location Database, and it does account for factors such as the bus schedule and the amount of time that it takes for you to walk from your destination to a bus stop. So we can see that while there are some areas that do see a good number of jobs accessible to them within a 45-minute transit commute, there are some block groups that do not see the same level of connectivity through our transit system. And there are even some block groups that see 0 jobs accessible to them with a 45-minute transit ride, and those would be the ones in red. Next slide, please. Compare that to the number of jobs accessible within a 45-minute drive, and we can see that almost every block group sees a high number of jobs accessible within a 45-minute drive. And of course, there's a variety of factors to consider as to why that might be, but I think that we can say that there are at least some gaps in what is accessible via transit commute versus an automobile commute. Next slide, please.
The number of miles driven per day within the boundaries of the city of Bloomington is an indicator of outcome 6.1, which reads, the transportation supports all travel modes for people of all ages and all abilities. According to the data that we received from INDOT, this ranges between 765,000 and 1.08 million miles per day. In conclusion, that's a lot of miles. Especially for a mode of transportation, which increasingly leads to uneven access for people with disabilities or those who are unable or choose not to drive. To put this into context, the line near the bottom of the chart represents 235,000 miles. That is the average distance between the Earth and the Moon. So in aggregate, vehicles driving in Bloomington accumulate enough miles to travel to the Moon 3 to 4 times every day.
The outcome for the next 3 slides is public streets and right-of-way have positive public health impacts. This indicator is for the total number of motor vehicle crash fatalities in Monroe County from 2013 to 2019. The total number of crash fatalities increased significantly in 2016 to reach 16 fatalities as the maximum of the chart. The crash fatalities was 4 in 2013 as the minimum of the chart. Next slide, please. This indicator shows the total number of all motor vehicle crash injuries as reported in Monroe County from 2013 to 2019. The total number of crash injuries has been reducing from 2016 to 2019 to reach 844 crash injuries in 2019 as the minimum of the chart. Next slide, please. This indicator is for the total number of crashes for people walking and bicycling in Monroe County from 2010 to 2015. For the people bicycling, the total number of crashes was 66 in 2012 as the highest number in this category in the chart. For the people walking, the total number of crashes was 76 in 2011 as the maximum of this category in the chart. 2012 was the only year that the total number of crashes for people bicycling was higher than people walking. Next slide, please.
Okay, that concludes the data we're presenting tonight. This is a list of the indicators that are included that we got the data for and will provide in a PDF because we were trying to not take the whole council session. And we include the list of sources, which we generally list also on each slide. Most of the time it's local or census related. And we just want to, we'll keep working on tracking, and this will be posted on the comprehensive plan website. I'll add a small note. I think everybody on the long range team did a great job in that we are compiling data for which we're not always the experts in the area of the data or what it's showing, but we will do our best to answer any questions. And thank you so much.
Okay, had to unmute myself. Thank you, staff, for that report. I will remind my council colleagues that there is no official council action needed tonight as a result of hearing this report. However, I would like to allow some time for council questions, if any. Do we have any questions from council members? Council Member Scambolery.
Yes, thank you. I have questions for Ms. Rickbile, Ms. Rosenberger, and Mr. Farshi, and I'll split that over as many different rounds as you need to. Could I start with Ms. Rickbile, and could you call up the slide 2.5.1, number of cases investigated and resolved regarding anti-discrimination laws?
I'll have it in 1 second if you can start your question. Sorry.
Okay. If my super quick addition is correct, there are 58 cases represented there. I'm curious about how many unique individuals are represented in those 58 cases. Does that question make sense?
It does. I do not know that information. This information was given to me in aggregate, not broken down by number of individuals.
Okay. Would it be possible to get that data?
I would have to check with Barbara.
Okay. Yeah, I would be interested in that number if you can get that. So, and then Ms. Rosenberger, going back to, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Scambolery. No, that's okay if you don't mind.
Oh, wait.
I'd like for them to clear the screen, please.
Well,
Thank
actually,
you.
I need the screen back if I'm going to continue.
Well, yeah, we'll get back to that. This is first round. Any other first round questions? Councilmember Boland.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sorry that I had to join late. So I didn't see the beginning of the presentation. One question is, how often does the long range planning staff plan to update this report?
So far annually. So I guess we just started last year was our first comprehensive plan data tracking report. This is our second. And I think what we're looking at is next year if we will be doing new indicators or a combination of reporting back on some indicators we've already provided data on, if we have updates and things like that.
Great, thank you. I have other questions, but I'll hold them. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from council members? Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. Can you explain at all what the water loss means to us when there's 1 point something billion gallons of water loss? I don't really understand what that means, and if there's any steps for remediation to alleviate that.
Yeah, so this water loss is for the utility-owned infrastructure, like water loss within the system pipes. And this data is not for the customer side, like the water loss from the water meters. And the most obvious form of water loss is from the main breaks. So many of these surface and areas are repaired relatively. Some breaks and background leakage do not surface. So it takes time for the utilities department to recognize them and take action. And the utilities department did a kind of a leak survey to recognize more of these kind of water losses to fix them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Smith. Do we have any other first round questions? Okay, before we get to second round, if I may, Councilmember Smith, one thing, and I know that was a much larger question, but being the council's rep on the Utility Service Board, one of the things that utilities is trying to fight that is the utilization of placing liners inside of pipes. Much of our water loss is coming through the pipes and seams and leaks and that sort of thing. And it seems to be more cost effective than totally digging down and replacing the pipes. I don't know how much distance that we've accomplished yet, but that is one of the things that utilities and the director has been working, and the board has been kind of working on. So, and I think that's part is try to reduce the water loss through our infrastructure system, if that'll help. So
Sure.
didn't mean to interject myself, but you know.
No, that's great. Thank you,
Okay.
President Sims. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Do we have any other first round questions? Seeing none, we'll go to second round now. Councilmember Sue. I'm sorry, Councilmember Scambolari. Then we'll go
Both of those are true, so that's
I
okay.
believe we have Councilmember Boland after that. Thank you.
Okay. Question for Ms. Rickbile. Could you put up the slide 1.6.3, percentage of population living below the poverty line?
I think this one might be for me. I'm sharing too.
Okay.
Yes.
Great, thank you. And this question actually came up with Mr. Zodi in regards to housing data and housing studies that we were given. So I'm struggling with this here. I want to make sure I'm understanding this map correctly. So the percentage of the population who are in poverty. So for example, I'm looking at the orange area just inside the bypass that includes North Jordan, the North Jordan Extension, which is getting renamed, of course, but the fraternities and sororities along that line. And if I'm understanding this map correctly, it says that 35% to 60% of the people living in that area are in poverty. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that is a correct interpretation.
Okay.
Yes, understanding. Yes.
Okay. And then a couple slides later is when you try and tease out the student population, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
That's what I'm struggling with, is how do we tease out those who are below our median income or who are living in poverty, and those who are not working intentionally because they're full-time students. So could you click through to a couple others, the slide you had that compared the different counties? Okay, thank you. This is am I understanding correctly that this is the tool we have, and that 36 to 60% includes students, but then this is our effort to kind of tease them out. Is that correct?
Yes, from the census. So I mean, we didn't do, like, I didn't do any computations here. It's just purely provided by the census, just to clarify. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, President Sims.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Boland, I believe you were next.
Yes, thank you. Actually, that slide that just went off, if Ms. Rosenbarger could put it back up. This slide says it's the percentage of 65 plus population, but it's still, I mean, is that the same as the previous slide?
I apologize. I just didn't correct the title up here. Is because
Okay.
It was
Part of that point from the comp plan, yeah.
yes, but the data that's included in the table is for all ages. So this
Okay.
is just responding to the similar Midwestern college towns portion of
Thank
it.
you. That helps and that clarifies. Also, I want to thank you for noting the distinction that apparently is part of our comp plan about the use of the phrase non-student and adult as synonymous, which they should not be. This is actually a question for President Sims. Mr. President, how does the USB, oh, you can take this slide off now, thank you. How does USB, is there a way to measure how much that water loss costs? Like how does, I mean, before I can even ask how we might remediate 1 billion gallons of water lost a year, how does the utilities department or the USB sort of reckon with how much that water loss costs?
I don't have that information with me or handy, and I would refer that to Utilities Director Vic Kelson at some
Okay.
point. So sorry, I don't have that information.
Okay, thank you.
Good
I understand.
question. Good
Yeah.
question.
The other question I have is about the slide about,
Councilmember
sorry,
Rowland.
if there's, yeah, I'll
No,
wait.
that's
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
That's okay. Do we have any other second round questions from council members? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you very much for all the work that went into this presentation. What struck me the most is the citywide vehicle miles traveled and how steep a peak it had in 2019. And then 2020, during the pandemic, it went down, but it didn't go down below 2018. Can you put that slide back up? I mean, okay, so it did go down below 2018, but it didn't, it's still the same as 2016, for example. So I wonder if any of the planners on the call have some theories about, first of all, this massive peak in 2019, and secondly, why the 2020 figures weren't less, given that everybody was at home for a few months.
I will start. 2019, we don't know, but generally in the US, my understanding is that the amount we drive is correlated currently with the state of the economy. And when people have more to spend, they're driving more, or have more jobs, they're driving more. But I don't know that that's a complete explanation. And I think it seems like a really remarkable bump as well. And then yes, 2020 was less, but I'm surprised by that too. And what we can look into is a little bit more how NDOT makes this calculation. So of course we don't all have like trackers in our vehicles, or a system where we have to report on our vehicle miles traveled. So this is based on NDOT making a calculation. They do lots of counts throughout the state and have that data, but still there's some equation involved.
Okay, if you find out more details about how NDOT calculates this, if you could relay those to council, that would be great. Thank you.
Definitely, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other second round questions? Okay, third round, Councilmember Boland, I believe you have one.
Actually, Councilmember Piedmont Smith literally asked the same question I was going to ask. So I have my answer. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. She's good like that sometimes.
She is good like that sometimes.
I will share or ask one question, and maybe it's just a statement and I don't know who it's directed at, but, and thank you all for the report and this tracking report update. But I was wondering, is there any rationale that that you guys are aware of that could, any rationale or reasoning on the differences on how we're tracking some of this information? For an example, the miles traveled, the difference between 2019 and 2020. Do we have any idea or any rationale as to why it jumps and then drops, and anything specific? Can anyone share something with that?
I'll jump in. It depends on each data point. So obviously it is really challenging. And this one is an area where our team has more expertise. So I would say, like, in terms of people driving more, we can look into it more for sure, but that mostly it's tied to economic well-being, and that when the nation as a whole is doing better, people drive more. My guess for COVID would be that eventually people started going places anyway, that people started going on trips, that eventually people were returning to work. Obviously not at the same levels, but still driving. Does that help or answer it a little bit, President Sims?
I think it does. I'm not so sure you even have the capacity to get down in the weeds, so to speak. Yeah. But what I would suggest is that in future reports, I guess it's annually, if there's any way that we could offer rationale on why the differences or large jumps, or explaining the data, so that we more fully understand it, then that would be appreciated, I think, by me, and can't speak for my colleagues, but I think it would help me if that's possible. Okay, do we have any other questions from council members? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank Ms. Rosenbarger, Mr. Farshi, Mr. Rickbile, and Mr. Gulick for a wonderful report. And we look forward to it as always. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're still in reports, and we'll now move down to reports of any council committees. So do we have any reports from committees? Seeing none, we will now go to public comment. Again, these are on items not on the agenda. If you would wish to publicly speak, please indicate by using the raised hand function on Zoom. And you can find that at the bottom of the screen, either in the participants button, reactions button, or the more buttons. If you're on a mobile device and a smartphone, then you could hit *9 to reach us, or you can send a note to the meeting host via the chat function on Zoom, should any of those not work. Mr. Lucas, do we see anyone interested this evening?
Not at the moment, but perhaps we should give it a few seconds.
Of course. Okay, seeing none, and I just have one screen. I'll let you. Did you see anything at all, Mr. Lucas?
I do not know.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on into the agenda, and we'll move on to appointments to boards and commissions. Do we have any appointments to boards or commissions this evening? Okay, seeing none, then I do believe we have some legislation for second reading tonight. Councilmember Flaherty.
President Sims, I move that ordinance 21-41 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and introduced. Moved and seconded that ordinance 21-41 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Rallo,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Sandberg.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Will the clerk please read?
Yes. 1 second, please. Okay. Ordinance 2141, an ordinance authorizing the refunding of certain outstanding sewage works revenue bonds of the city, authorizing the issuance of the City of Bloomington, Indiana Sewage Works refunding revenue bonds of 2021 to provide funds for such refunding and the payment of the costs thereof, and addressing other matters connected therewith. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance authorizes the City of Bloomington to issue sewage works refunding revenue bonds 2021 in one or more series in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $8,500,000. The 2021 bonds will be issued to refund the city's currently outstanding sewage works refunding revenue bonds series 2012A and its currently outstanding sewage works revenue bonds series 2012C, all for the purpose of obtaining lower interest costs and a reduction of debt service payments on such outstanding bonds, thereby achieving significant savings for the city. Your due pass recommendation was 600.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Move that ordinance 21-41 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved in second. I see that we have Mr. Kelson, Mr. Underwood, and our friend Mr. Crone this evening. Whoever will start us off, please proceed.
Good evening, Jeff Underwood, City Controller. We're here to talk about two different bond issues. We'll talk about the 2012 Sewage Works Series A's and C issues first. I'll just give a quick synopsis. I have with me tonight Bradley Bingham with Barnum Thornburg, who is our bond counsel, and Buzz Crone with Otto Crone and Associates, who is our financial advisor on this. This is repaid 100% by the Sewage Works. It will not extend the life of the bond, so we have the same maturity. The estimated gross savings on this is $605,000, and the net present value savings is $558,000. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. And as you know, we talked about or discussed it in some depth in our committee meeting. So I will now go to council members. We have any questions on Ordinance 21-41? Okay, seeing, oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Holden.
I didn't realize, I had forgotten that Mr. Kelson would be here because of this ordinance. Is it possible to ask him about the water loss question from before, even though it's not directly related to the financing aspect of this ordinance?
I would prefer that we do that outside this ordinance discussion. If that's okay with you. Okay, do we have any other questions from council? Okay, Councilmember Volan, before I go to the public for comments, yes, please ask Mr. Kelson that. We have him here and it's timely, so please go ahead.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Mr. Kelson, I mean, we are talking about a refinancing of bonds, and the question of the cost to the utilities department of water loss came up. Can you explain how you guys reckon with 1 billion gallons of water loss a year? Like, what does that cost, and how can it be remediated? How does it play a role in financing of operations? You're muted.
Muted. Sorry. It really doesn't affect this particular issue because this is a sewer bond, but in response, I really don't know exactly where those numbers came from or what or how they were interpreted. So I will look into that and report back as soon as I know some more details about it. But I don't know exactly what numbers were quoted. There's a lot of numbers out there, and as you know, we replaced all of our meters about 1.5 years ago. So a lot of those measurements may have been affected, by the new meters. So we do have to be a little careful whenever we're interpreting anything that has to do with in and out. We're still trying to sort out exactly how much of a difference the new meters are making on things.
Okay,
we have been so I hate to have to have
no,
on
it's okay.
this a little bit. But I will dig into it and find out.
Well, I guess all I would ask is that any updated numbers, more solid numbers that you can pass on to the long-range planners would make next year's report more accurate. But if we can get any kind of more concrete data this year, I think it would be instructive. But it's not urgent. It's clear that they need to have a reliable source of data from CBU that would help them answer that particular question.
Oh, I totally agree. We will work on exactly what it is
Great.
It is that's being reported. Make sure that it's accurate and consistent.
Thank you, Mr. Kellison, and thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome. And for full transparency and to avoid any possible confusion with those present, Councilmember Boland's question had to do with the report from the Comprehensive Plan Tracking Report, and not directly related to the ordinance that we're discussing now. So just for full transparency, you're absolutely correct. Okay, do we have any other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, we'll now go to the public for any public comments on ordinance 21-41. Do we have any takers this evening, Mr. Lucas?
Don't see any hands raised at the moment. I'll just remind folks if they would like to comment, please use the raise hand function, which you should be able to find in your control panel under either the reactions button, the participants button, or the more button. And if you're not able to locate that, please send a chat to the meeting host and we will acknowledge you that way. And I'm not seeing any hands go up at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. And seeing none, we'll now go to council for any final comments on ordinance 21-41. Comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, are we ready for the question? Will the clerk please call the roll on ordinance 21-41?
Yes, Councilmember Rallo. Or no,
Yes.
Volin, actually. Well, sorry, Councilmember Rallo and Volin for that. So Councilmember Rallo, you said yes, and Councilmember Volin?
Yes.
Thank you. Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Scambalori?
Yes.
Sims?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
And Sandberg?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Ordinance 21-41 is adopted 9-0. Moving on, I do believe we have more legislation for second readings this evening. Councilmember Flaherty.
Move that ordinance 21-42 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded. Ordinance 21-41 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Volin?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Scambalori?
Yes.
Sims?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
And Rallo? I'm sorry, Councilmember Rallo, I didn't hear your answer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion passes. Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2142, an ordinance authorizing the refinancing of a certain equipment lease purchase agreement of the city, authorizing the issuance of the City of Bloomington, Indiana General Revenue Annual Appropriation Refunding Bonds of 2021 to provide funds for such refinancing and the payment of the cost thereof, appropriating the proceeds derived from the sale of such refunding bonds, and addressing other matters connected therewith. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance authorizes the City of Bloomington to issue its General Revenue Annual Appropriation Refunding Bonds of 2021 in one or more series in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $13,100,000 and appropriates the proceeds thereof. The 2021 bonds will be issued to refinance the city's obligations under the equipment lease purchase agreement dated November 30th, 2017, between the Bank of America Public Capital Corporation as lessor and the city as lessee, related to the purchase, installation, and financing of certain solar panel systems and related work, all for the purpose of obtaining lower interest rates and a reduction of debt service payments on such outstanding lease payments, thereby achieving significant savings for the city. Your committee do pass recommendation with 6-0-0.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Move that ordinance 21-42 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. And before we move to presentation, I do believe that there is one amendment to Ordinance 21-42 that is being prepared by city staff ahead of tonight's meeting. And I will be happy to introduce that if that's acceptable, as long as staff that brought forth the amendment will speak on its behalf and explain it. I would like to move Amendment 1 for Ordinance 21-42.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll, please?
Oh, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
For an amendment, we just, we don't need a roll call on this introduction.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Mr. Allen, will you be discussing and presenting Amendment 1?
I'd be happy to. So Amendment 1 essentially takes out all the appropriation language from the bond refunding ordinance. And the reason for that is because we need to provide proper notice to appropriate the funds from the revenues of the bond. And as you'll see later tonight in the committee of the whole, that language for appropriating the proceeds of this refunding bond has been folded into the end of the year additional appropriation. And that's so that we can notice a public hearing for the December 1st council meeting. So what this amendment would do is simply strike that appropriation language, and then you will see it in another ordinance later on. Otherwise, everything is the same for this refunding bond.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Allen. I'm sorry, I was trying to catch up on something else. Do we have any questions from council on Amendment 1 for Ordinance 21-42? Okay, seeing none, we'll now go to the public for any public comment on Amendment 1 for Ordinance 21-42. We'll remind you that you can please use the raise hand function on Zoom, either through the participants button, the reactions button, or the more buttons. If you're on a mobile device or a phone, you can use *9. If none of those works, please send a note to the meeting host via the chat function on Zoom so that we could acknowledge your intent to publicly speak. Have no takers. Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we'll go back to council for any final comments on Amendment 1 of Ordinance 21-42. Okay, seeing none, I believe we're ready for the question on Amendment 1 of Ordinance 21-42. And will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Rosenberger?
Yes.
Scambaluri?
Yes.
Sims?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Rallo?
Yes.
And Volin?
Yes.
Thank you. Amendment 1 to Ordinance 21-42 passes 9-0. Now we'll hear a presentation on Ordinance 21-42 as amended. Is that you, Mr. Underwood, or thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Underwood? Go ahead.
Again, Jeff Underwood, City Controller. Again, I'll just give a quick synopsis of this. This particular issue replaces a lease with a traditional bond. It's titled a general revenue bond with an annual appropriation, hence the amendment that you'll see and that language added in that pledges any and all revenues for the city, including a property tax backup. It is not a property tax based debt. It does not have a rate. It is general revenues. CBU will pay 53%. The RDC pays 15% and the Parks Department pays 32%. That allocation does not change with this refunding. It just means less payments for all those groups. It does not extend the maturity. It's the same length as before. The estimated gross savings is $573,000 and the net present value savings is $501,000. Again, we have Bradley Bingham with Barnes and Thornburg and Buzzchrome with Autochrome and Associates. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those now.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to council. If we have any questions on ordinance 21-42 as amended. Okay, seeing none, we'll now go to the public for any public comment on ordinance 21-42 as amended. Mr. Lucas.
In a moment, and again, if you would like to comment, please indicate by using the raise hand function or sending a chat to the meeting host that you would like to do so.
Okay, see any, sir?
No takers.
Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we'll now go back to council for any final comments on ordinance 21-42 as amended. Seeing none, are we ready for the question? Will the clerk please call the roll on ordinance 21-42 as amended?
Yes, Councilmember Scambalori,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
and Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ordinance 21-42 as amended is adopted 9-0. I do believe we have more legislation for second readings this evening. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to move that ordinance 21-43 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved that ordinance 21-43 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sims,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
and Scambalori.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that motion passes. Will the clerk please read?
Yes, ordinance 2143 to amend Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Vehicles and Traffic regarding amending Section 1532090 to adjust the time of a limited parking zone on 2nd Street, Sections 1512010, 1512030, 1516010, 1520020, 1532080, 1532100, and 1537020 to reflect the changing of the name of Jordan Avenue to Eagleton Avenue. Section 1532030 and 1532080 to add angle parking and no parking zones to Illinois Court. Section 1532100 and Section O loading zones to add one loading zone to East 7th Street. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance amends Title 15, Vehicles and Traffic of the Bloomington Municipal Code and comes forth at the request of city staff and the Parking and Traffic Commissions. The ordinance makes the following changes. Excuse me. It changes the time limit of a limited parking zone on 2nd Street. It amends the code to reflect the changing of the name of Jordan Avenue to Eagleton Avenue. It adds angle parking and no parking zones to West Illinois Court, and it adds a loading zone to East 7th Street. Your due pass recommendation for this ordinance was 6-0-0.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Move that ordinance 21-43 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved in second. I see Mr. Farshi is here to present, I think. Thank you. Please proceed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm Amir Farshi, long-range planner for the Planning and Transportation Department. Let me share my screen. So can you hear me okay? And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. So the ordinance proposes various amendments to the Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Vehicles and Traffic. Title 15 is the title of the code, subject to frequent change and revisions. These proposals are the result of feedback from the Planning and Transportation, Engineering, Parking Services Division of Public Works, and legal departments. The purpose of these recommendations is to address issues that have come to a staff's attention through public requests, commission's recommendations, or 180-day orders. Some items are related to safety issues, improving visibility for people, safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, traffic calming, and housekeeping changes. These requests for changes to Title 15 were presented to the Traffic Commission, Parking Commission, and Council Committee of the Whole last week. The ordinance makes the following changes to Title 15. The ordinance changes the time limit of a limited 11 parking spaces on 614 East 2nd Street in front of the Elm Restaurant. The ordinance changes the 1 hour free parking to 2 hour free parking. It changes the enforcement hours to start from 8 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. The ordinance changes the name of Jordan Avenue to Eagleson Avenue. And the next change is the ordinance adds approximately 21 angle parking spaces to West Illinois Court in blue areas on the map. This blue area, and adds 2 no parking zones in red areas. And the last part is the ordinance adds a loading zone at 120 East 7th Street in front of the Pooch's restaurant. The details and maps are included in the meeting packet. Please let the staff know if you have any questions, and let me introduce the staff who are in this Zoom meeting. Beth Rosenberger, Planning Services Manager, Michelle Wall, Parking Services Director, and Ryan Cox, Parking Enforcement Supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Farchi. We'll now go to council for any questions on Ordinance 21-43. Councilmember Bolin.
Is there, I was under the understanding that what is now called the North Jordan Extension would get a different name. Will it also be referred to as Eagleson, or will it have a different name? I don't see that in the text of the language.
I can answer it. The Jordan extension will be named Fuller Avenue, and it's not included because the street, the section that will be called Fuller, is owned by IU. So there's a break in it, and that section, then there are no references to it in city code. So we just didn't include it.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, we'll now go to the public for any public comments on Ordinance 21-43. I will remind the public that you can indicate your desire to speak by using the raised hand function on Zoom. You can get there through the participants button, the reactions button, or the more buttons. If you're on a mobile device, you can reach us by *9, or if neither of those work, you can send a note to our meeting host via the chat function on Zoom, and we'll assist in order to allow you to get your public comments. Mr. Lucas, do we have any takers?
Do not see any takers at the moment.
Okay. Just give it just a few more seconds. And seeing none, we'll now go back to council for any final comments on ordinance 2143. And see none, are we ready for the question? Will the clerk please call the roll on ordinance 21-43?
Yes, Councilmember Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
Scambaluri,
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance 21-43 is adopted 9-0-0. And before we go to Councilmember Flaherty, I just want to add to our colleagues in the public, the IU portion of North Jordan or the Jordan Extension will be named Fuller Avenue, I believe. And that'll be named after Miss Maddie Fuller. And I won't waste time this evening for that, but you can please Google or check into IU history. It has to do with African-American history and one of our students. And that's all we'll get into this evening. But thank you. So I do believe we have more legislation for second reading this evening. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, I move that ordinance 21-44 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded that ordinance 21-44 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
Scambaluri,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
and Flaherty.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion, ordinance 21-44 passes. Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2144 to amend Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Vehicles and Traffic regarding amending Chapter 1532 to add a new schedule for reserved motorcycle parking, Section 1537-210, to clarify that the parking services director or designee may sell up to 80 employee parking permits total in zones 4 and 5, Section 1540-019, to provide that vehicles with accessible decals, placards, or plates may park in accessible parking spaces designated for electric vehicles, whether or not the vehicle is electric or is being charged, and Section 1548-070 to delete the administrative fee for towed vehicles. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance amends Title 15, Vehicles and Traffic of the Bloomington Municipal Code and comes at the request of city staff and the parking commissions. The ordinance makes the following changes. It creates a new schedule designating on-street reserved motorcycle parking. It allows the parking services director to sell a total of 80 employee parking permits annually in zones 4 and 5 total instead of a maximum of 40 spaces in each zone. It clarifies that anyone with a disability placard, plate, or decal may park in accessible parking spaces designated for electric vehicles, regardless of whether they have an electric vehicle or are charging the vehicle. And it deletes the administrative towing fee currently paid to the Bloomington Police Department. Your committee do pass recommendation for this ordinance with 6-0-0.
Thank you, Clerk Bolden. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, I move that ordinance 21-44 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved to second. I see Ms. Wall is here to present. How are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you. My name is
Thank
Michelle Wall. My name is Michelle Wall. I'm the Parking Service Director for the City of Bloomington. The purpose of this recommendation is to address issues that have come to staff's attention through public requests and commission's recommendations. The people that have worked towards this through city staff is the Planning and Transportation Department, Engineering, and Public Works, the Legal Department, and Parking Services. The section 1 in reference to motorcycle parking, thanks Amir. We are proposing to add 2 reserved parking motorcycle spaces, and this was based on public request, and they will be located on 112 West 6th Street. And there is a map to show you where they're located. The second part of that section is to codify what's currently already there, 1 reserved motorcycle space on 100 West Kirkwood. The second section is currently we have downtown business permits. Before I was appointed this position, there was a recommendation when they combined all the zones to help circulate the permits. The downtown was a new type of permit, and there was 40 separated in zone for zone 4 and 40 for zone 5. I'm just asking to condense to keep the number at 80, but at the same time consolidate those. So if there is 50 in zone 4 and 30 in zone 5, I would be able to do so, or my staff, if doesn't need, would be able to do so without continuing to get my authorization. The next section, which is section 3, is clarifying that these are currently, there's your picture, Councilmember Sims. There's the first picture, there's the second picture. This visual just shows that currently in Trades Garage, there's 2 ADA spaces with 1 charging station for each space. This clarifies that accessible spaces are paramount and they're first come. The EV station is the second, and this code, this change will clarify that. And there's only 2. And like I said, they're right in Trades District Garage. And then last but not least is the change to receiving money through the police department. As of January 1, the parking enforcement officers moved out of the police department and is now under the Public Works and Parking Service divisions. And we just request that fee be eliminated, and they will not have to actually go to the police department to pay this fee. And we will look into adding the fee when we get our tow practices in place. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, Ms. Wall. We will now go to council for any questions on ordinance 21-44. Councilmember Boland.
Yes, just briefly to clarify, the total number of disabled parking spaces in the garage where the EV charges are is greater than the number of spaces devoted to EV charges, right? How many total disabled spaces are there in the garage?
10.
Sorry?
10.
10, okay, so just 2 of them are also being doubled up as EV charge spaces.
Yes, this was not caught in the design of the facility, and these are the closest ADA spaces, and they had to stay.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from council members? Okay, I do have one. Ms. Wall, you mentioned, I guess, with section 15.48.070 to delete the administrative fee for towed vehicles. And I think you mentioned that function will be moved to Public Works. Is that correct? Is that where parking enforcement is now?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And do we expect, will there be legislation later to make that move?
Yes, sir. Mhm. We just needed to
Okay.
remove it at this time from the BP.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from council? Seeing none, we'll now move to the public for any public comment on ordinance 21-44. I will remind you to please use the raised hand function in Zoom. You can use it or get it through the participants button, reactions button, or the more buttons at the bottom of the screen. Mobile devices can reach us by using *9, or you could send a note to our meeting host via the chat function on Zoom if neither of those are accommodating to you. Mr. Lucas, do we have any takers, do you think?
Give it just a moment. I don't see any hands going up immediately. But we'll wait a few moments here.
Okay, seeing none, we'll now return to council for any final comments on ordinance 21-44. Okay, seeing none, thank you for your presentation, Ms. Wall. Are we ready for the question? Will the clerk please call the roll on ordinance 21-44?
Yes, Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
and Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance 21-44 is adopted 9-0-0. Thank you all for your participation. Moving down the agenda, I do believe we have legislation for first reading this evening. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, I'd like to move that ordinance 21-45 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Thank you. It's been properly moved in second that ordinance 21-45 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
and Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded that ordinance 21-45 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 21-45 to amend Title 7 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Animals regarding amending Chapter 7.01, Chapter 7.16, Chapter 7.54, and Chapter 7.56. The synopsis is as follows. Ordinance 21-45 is sponsored by Councilmember Sandberg, Councilmember Piedmont Smith, and Councilmember Rallo, and would amend portions of Title 7 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Animals. The ordinance makes the following changes. It revises Bloomington Municipal Code Section 7.01.010 to add, remove, and revise various defined terms. It revises Bloomington Municipal Code Section 7.16.040 to remove the requirement that the breeder's name be posted on the animal's kennel. It removes Bloomington Municipal Code Section 7.16.045 in its entirety. It revises Bloomington Municipal Code Section 7.54.030 to make the commercial animal establishment fee for pet shops $250. It adds Bloomington Municipal Code Section 7.16.070, which prohibits the sale of dogs and cats by pet shops. And it revises Bloomington Municipal Code Section 7.56.030 to add a penalty for the sale of dogs or cats by a pet shop.
Thank you, Clerk Bowden. I am referring ordinance 21-45 to the Committee of the Whole to meet immediately following the conclusion of tonight's regular session. Okay, I do believe we have another piece of legislation for first reading. Councilmember Clarity.
So I'd like to move that appropriation ordinance 21-05 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded that appropriation ordinance 21-05 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Sandberg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that appropriation ordinance 21-05 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only. Will the clerk please read?
Yes. Appropriation ordinance 2105 to specially appropriate from the general fund, public safety lit fund, solid waste fund, cumulative capital development fund, food and beverage tax fund, motor vehicle highway fund, parks and recreation general fund, police pension fund, alternative transportation fund, and the rental inspection program fund expenditures not otherwise appropriated, and to appropriate the proceeds of the solar refunding bonds of 2021, appropriating various transfers of funds within the general fund, public safety lit fund, parks and recreation general fund, alternative transportation fund, cumulative capital development fund, public pension fund, and appropriating additional funds from the general fund, food and beverage tax, rental inspection fund, motor vehicle highway, solid waste fund, and the proceeds from the solar refunding bonds of 2021. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance appropriates various transfers of funds within the general fund, public safety lit fund, parks and recreation general fund, alternative transportation fund, cumulative capital development fund, and police pension fund. It also appropriates additional funds from the general fund, food and beverage tax fund, rental inspection fund, solid waste fund, and the motor vehicle highway fund, and appropriates the proceeds from the 2021 solar refunding bonds. Please note this ordinance was revised after distribution in the legislative packet, but before introduction at the November 17, 2021 regular session 2, revise the second whereas clause and insert the third whereas clause to separate out transfers between the police department and dispatch and to specify the sources for those transfers. Correct the fifth whereas clause to reflect the transfer of funds by the Parks and Recreation Department from classification 1 to classifications 2 and 3, as opposed to a transfer from classifications 2 and 3 to classification 1, and amend the corresponding portions of section 1 of the ordinances to reflect these changes.
Thank you, Clerk Bowden. I am referring appropriation ordinance 21-05 to the Committee of the Whole to meet immediately following the conclusion of tonight's regular session. Thank you. We will now move on through the agenda to additional public comment, which we are now at, and we will hear comments from the public on items not covered in the agenda. We have set aside 25 minutes max for this purpose, and we'll limit each speaker to no more than 5 minutes. I would also add that if you wish to speak, please use the raise hand function on Zoom, and you can get there through the participants button, reactions button, or the more buttons. If you're on a mobile device, you could get us by hitting *9 or you can send a note to our meeting host via the chat function on Zoom to indicate your desire to publicly speak this evening. Mr. Lucas, do we have any takers?
You have a message from a Sam Dove, who I believe is formulating a comment that he plans to send in over chat. So if we could give it just a moment there. And I do see a hand raised from Leslie Henderson. I apologize, the rest of your name's cut off, but you should be up first and can now unmute.
Hello.
Hello, Ms. Henderson, how are you?
Actually, it's Karen Kidwell. It's Leslie's mother.
I'm sorry. I apologize. How are you this evening?
Oh, it wasn't your fault. I have her phone.
Okay, you have about 5 minutes.
Okay. I owned Delilah's pet shop for about 40 years, and I gave it.
Excuse me, and I'll ask our parliamentarian to make sure I'm correct. But that item that you're speaking to is on the agenda this evening.
Yes.
There will be public comment going into the committee meeting immediately following this one. So your comments will be better served for then.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, I just want to keep things straight. So thank you very much and hope to hear from you again soon. Are we prepared for Mr. Dove's chat, Mr. Lucas?
I have not received his comment. If I do, after we close public comment, I can certainly pass that along to all the council members.
Okay, thank you. Haven't heard from Mr. Dove in a while, so it'll be good. We'll now move on to the agenda to matters dealing with council schedule. Mr. Lucas.
Yes, a few items to bring to your attention tonight. First is that next week, there is no scheduled council meeting in recognition of the holiday. So the next meeting after tonight, the next regular meeting after tonight will be the December 1st regular session. And just a note that that meeting and then the December 8th meeting and then the 15th will be the last three regular meetings of the council for this year. So there is, in addition to those three meetings, one work session scheduled coming up this Friday, the 19th at 12 noon, which is an opportunity to hear about the items that will be coming forward between now and the end of the year. There are several resolutions that will be coming to you all to approve of certain interlocal agreements that expire at the end of 2021. Those include a resolution on building code authority, an agreement with the county on the Justice Assistance Grant funds, and I believe a resolution related to the Sibling City USA agreement recently announced by the administration with Palo Alto, California. In addition to those resolutions, there will be an ordinance related to a historic designation of a property along East Hillside Drive coming to the council again at that December 1st meeting for first reading. I believe those are the items as of today that are scheduled between now and the end of the year. As always, I'm interested to know if members are able to attend this Friday's work session where you can hear about those upcoming items.
Okay, thank you very much. Council member, I'm sorry. We're putting up hands to see who will be there Friday. I apologize. I saw 3 hands, I'll make 4. Okay, we'll schedule it for Friday at noon then. And hopefully more can show up. Okay, thank you very much. Was that everything, Mr. Lucas?
Yes. Thank you. And I still don't have the public comments, so I will share that if I do receive it.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other business, and I see none, before we adjourn, and before we start the committee of the whole, if there's no objections, I'd like to take a whatever you think is reasonable, 4-minute break before the start of the committee of the whole. Is that acceptable to my colleagues? Good. Then do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, then properly moved in second. We're adjourned. See you in 4 minutes.
I'll call to order this committee of the whole meeting of the Bloomington Common Council for Wednesday, November 17th, 2021. We have 2 items on the agenda this evening. We have Ordinance 2145 to amend Title 7 of the Municipal Code titled Animals. And then we have Appropriation Ordinance 2105, which is our end of year appropriation ordinance. And we will start with Ordinance 2145. I am one of the co-sponsors along with Councilmember Sandberg and Councilmember Rollo. And since I am going to be making part of the presentation, I would like to ask Council President Sims or Council Vice President Scamboluri to take the virtual gavel for this portion of the committee meeting.
Thank you. We did rock, paper, scissors, and Councilmember Scamboluri won.
All right, then.
No, she graciously agreed to do that. So.
And therein lies governing. Yes, I'm happy to do that. So, Council members Piedmont Smith, Rollo, and Sandberg, would anyone like to present any particular order?
I think we wanted to actually start with Samantha Morton from the Humane Society of the United States, who is with us this evening to give us the context of this ordinance. So,
Great.
Ms. Morton, thank you for being here.
Welcome, Ms. Morton. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and honorable members of the Bloomington City Council. Thank you so much for this wonderful invitation to allow me to speak with you this evening. And I want to just give a special thanks to Councilmember Piedmont Smith, Councilmember Rollo, and Councilmember Sandberg for sponsoring this ordinance. I wanted to give a little bit of background on this issue. So you may know that puppy mills are a big issue here in Indiana. And over the years at the Humane Society of the United States, we have connected the sale of dogs and cats at pet stores to inhumane puppy mills. And over the last several years, we've seen a nationwide trend of communities demanding the humane sourcing of pets in their communities. And they've been doing this by passing humane pet store ordinances in their communities, much like the ordinance that you're considering here this evening. So to date, there's been 400 ordinances that have passed in 31 states. Most recently, we had ordinances that had passed. I'm so sorry, my So sorry about that. My cat wanted to join us this evening as well. So going back, we've had that have passed state laws that have prohibited the sale of dogs and cats in pet stores, and most recently, including Washington and Illinois. And here in Indiana, we have seen an effect here from the Illinois law passing because there have been several stores in Northwest Indiana specifically that have passed ordinances in response to the Illinois law passing as well, because we've seen stores that sell puppies move into Northwest Indiana, most recently including into Portage, Schererville, and Hammond, Indiana. So I think you've seen there's been 5 communities across the state of Indiana that have passed similar ordinances, and we really believe that communities take a big role in ensuring the humane sourcing of pets in their communities. I also was asked to speak a little bit about the difference between puppy and kitten mills. And so I wanted to cover that briefly. So puppy and kitten mills are very similar in terms of the conditions in which the animals are kept. I would say that kitten mills are a little bit of a less large scale issue just because people are less willing to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on particular breeds of cats. But the issues are still concerning. The animals are not getting humane treatment. They're often in stacked cages. There's also, issues with a lack of socialization. And for cats, that's a particularly big issue because they need that human interaction, believe it or not, even more than dogs do. So that's an important consideration when we're talking about puppy and kitten mills. I'm also here to answer any questions that you might have this evening. And I just, again, thank you for your time and your consideration of this ordinance.
Thank you so much, Ms. Morton. Do the sponsors have additional folks? Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes, I have a PowerPoint presentation I'd like to use to walk us through the ordinance.
Great.
So I'll share my screen if I can. All right, so Ordinance 2145 is addressing a problem that we have seen nationwide, and as Ms. Morton just mentioned, is something that many communities have sought to address locally. And that the problem is that dogs and cats sold in pet shops are often sourced from puppy or kitten mills where conditions are inhumane. And occasionally it's not, the pet shop is trying to do everything they can to make sure their suppliers are businesses of integrity, but sometimes there's obfuscation, there's a will to hide the reality of what's going on in these places. So these ordinances have been a strong tool in trying to stem the proliferation of these mills in order to cut the pipeline, basically, so that there are fewer places that would actually purchase from these mills. Of course, the consumer aspect of this is that often people who go to pet shops to purchase these animals don't know the background and how they were raised. So we do have currently in Chapter 7 of our municipal code, the section called Consumer Protection Requirements, but that is really not sufficient to make sure that animals that are for sale are raised in humane conditions. Currently, the consumer protection requirements are certainly a good step, but again, we feel like there's more regulation required. So we do require currently a record of vaccinations, known diseases, past medical treatment, but there's no verification of whether the information provided by the suppliers is accurate. There's no follow through. Many diseases and congenital conditions do not even appear until an animal is older. So you might have a pet that somebody takes home from a pet shop and later has significant behavioral or physical problems. And there's no verification of the conditions in which the animal was bred or was born, and how that parent animal is treated, the mother is treated. And of course, we look at other levels of government, whether there are sufficient regulations, and there are unfortunately not. The USDA has minimal regulations, saying you must at least provide, food and water, but they really it's just the minimal for survival. It's not prescribing any kind of actual atmosphere in which an animal could thrive. So as Ms. Morton said, a local solution is to try to enact ordinances that ban the sale of cats and dogs, and to starve the puppy and kitten mills of customers. Thousands of independent pet shops across the country thrive on a business model that does not include the sale of cats and dogs. So we see that in some of our chain stores here in town, Petco and PetSmart, and even some of the local stores like T&T. They do well in just selling food and toys and other accoutrements that people need when they have pets. And of course, the bigger stores here in town also host animal rescue groups and animals from the shelter. And that's a great relationship, because then people who adopt those animals end up, spending quite a bit of money at the shop where the adoption took place. So just to run through the ordinance then, the first part is about definitions, defining an animal rescue organization. The ordinance further eliminates a distinction that we currently have in our definitions between a minor and a major pet shop. The major pet shop is the one that sells cats or dogs. So that distinction is moot. Furthermore, we define what it means to sell or offer for sale, so that there's no confusion as to what we are banning. It clarifies that a person can include any legal entity. And here's a logo of the Southern Indiana Animal Rescue, which is one of the organizations that helps place animals in homes, in good homes. Then the next sections of Ordinance 2145 removes the requirement to post the name of the breeder of cats and dogs at pet shops, since their sale will no longer be allowed. It again deletes the distinction between minor and major pet shops. It deletes the consumer protection requirements I referred to earlier, because those are no longer relevant. And then it consolidates the permit fee for a minor and major pet shop into one fee, which is $250, because the city does do inspections of pet shops. Fee. Then the final sections of the ordinance add a new paragraph to the municipal code called Sale of Dogs and Cats by Pet Shops Prohibited. As I mentioned, it still allows the pet shops to provide free space to display cats and dogs from a shelter or an animal rescue organization. But it makes it clear that if the pet shop does host these animals, it cannot have any financial interest in their adoption, so that there isn't any temptation or possibility to sneak in animals that maybe are not raised in a humane way. And as far as violation and penalties, each sale or offer of sale of a cat or a dog will count as a violation of the ordinance. So there could be multiple violations, and the penalty is $500 per violation. For the effective date, we did consult with Alex Crowley in the Economic Development Department, as somebody who has worked with a lot of local businesses, and he did advise that it would take a year really for pet shops to change their business model and to have enough time to plan ahead for this change. And we are talking about 2 pet shops locally that do sell dogs and cats. The Humane Society of the U.S. does provide assistance to pet shops for the transition, some advice and marketing assistance to help, because it will be a major change for the shops. And the enforcement then after January 1st, 2023 will be complaint-based. So that is it for my presentation. And I don't know if my co-sponsors would like to add anything at this point.
Thank you, Isabel. I will go next. And this has been a long time in the vetting process as for the members of the community that have approached the council to sponsor this ordinance. And so I do believe we have given it great thought. We have vetted all the consequences, and we feel very comfortable at this point with the community being so much in favor of this. In fact, a lot of people who we have approached in the research of this ordinance have said, this is long in coming. This is something I think much of the Bloomington community supports and had been hoping for a long time. And so as we've weighed and measured what we should be doing going forward here, we feel very comfortable with the ordinance, in particular with the year that we have granted as a grace period for the pet shops who will be most affected to come into compliance with this if it is approved, which we hope it will be. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Rallo, did you want to add?
No, I don't have anything to add, thanks to my colleagues.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all so much for this presentation. Let's come to council for questions. Councilmember Rosenbarger, and then Councilmember Sims.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for bringing this in for that presentation. I wanted to ask, is there like an average for pet stores across the country about what percentage of sales of their income comes from the sale of cats and dogs?
Ms. Morton, is that something you might have an idea of?
So I know about 4% of puppy selling pet stores, or about 4% of puppies still come from stores. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head of what percentage of sales come from pet stores, but that might be something the local stores could provide.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think that with us offering that year in transition, that is a lot of time to figure out, how to transition into different types of revenue. Thank you.
Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I want to thank my colleagues and Ms. Morton for the presentation. My question has to do with the financial interest in the adoption of dogs and cats that may be displayed in the stores in conjunction with shelter or that from that avenue. So I was wondering about enforcement, and then it was stated that they'll be complaint based. And then my question is which entity investigates these complaints, or is this part of the city's function with regard to enforcement based on customer or citizen complaints?
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
It's the Director of Animal Care and Control who is charged with enforcement. So the city, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions? Councilmember Flaherty. I think that's kind of blurry, but I think
I can never get my hand to show up on the screen unless I put it in front of my face. Maybe that's the best option. Thank you, Chair Scambolari. I believe what we've received a bit of feedback or heard from the two pet stores in town whom this would affect. And I was curious if there's been more in-depth conversations with between the sponsors and those store owners about. I think they're both opposed to this ordinance, but what specifically their alternative proposed solution is, or why they think it's not a good ordinance. Have those conversations happened, or really just through notification and written communication?
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, so the two pet shops were notified prior to the meeting of the Animal Care and Control Commission on November 8th. And I did not, sorry, my cat really wants to be involved in this. I wonder why. I did not hear from them until I think it was today via email. And from Anthony's Pets, the owner did email us. I think everybody on the council received that, and I replied to him, and I tried to put him in touch with Ms. Morton for some assistance with the transition. And then the only thing I heard from the other shop was through an attorney. So no, I have not had one-on-one conversations. I'd be happy to do that. But I think that, yeah, it may still be forthcoming. I mean, in the case of Anthony's Pets, that owner had specific concerns about the extension of his lease at his current location, and sort of, you know, had plans to retire after a certain period. And so it was very particular to his situation. But that's all I can say. I don't know about my colleagues.
Yes, that is accurate. Letters were sent or emails were sent to the two shops that are going to be most impacted with the, I believe, the language in it. And I do want to thank, by the way, our staff assistant attorney, Heather Lacey, for being so diligent in her research and us speaking with her all along the way about the best way to make notice and to give them an opportunity to communicate with any of the sponsors or her with any concerns they had. And it's mostly just until today that we are hearing. Now, because of the break in our agenda, because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we will have 2 weeks in order to have further conversations, should there be any compelling reasons why the ordinance as it is currently written is not satisfactory to the pet shop owners. But again, we feel very comfortable in our research up to this point that it does meet what we hope to accomplish here, which is to not give any further fuel or fodder for kitten or puppy mills. There are better ways in order for people to buy the kind of dogs that they want directly from responsible breeders. And so that is what I think an ordinance like this would be encouraging. And again, the pet shops themselves, we're hoping that they will change their business model in a manner that will respect their operations as a small business without having to depend on the sale of dogs and cats.
Thank you. Additional comments on that or additional questions from council? Councilmember Flaherty?
I'd be happy to defer to Councilmember Sims as well first.
Oh, I'm sorry if I missed that.
Yeah, it's okay. I just saw his hand.
You're muted.
Oops, sorry. Thank you. I have a blurred background too, so you may not see that. But my question to the sponsors, and with regard to the research, one of the emails that I received, I think all of us did, from one of the pet owners, basically indicated that possible move to the next or to an adjoining county to continue the business until they decided to retire. My question is, I know there hasn't been with this, or I'm assuming there hasn't been with this ordinance, but do we see a need or have a plan to maybe expand this type of ordinance language regionally? Do anyone think that might have an effect moving forward?
Councilmember Sandberg?
Well, certainly we can only act within our purview.
Yeah.
As council members of the city of Bloomington, we can extend our reach to even the county. Although I think you heard from Ms. Morton's presentation, this does have a compounding effect as more and more communities who are concerned about humane treatment of animals are becoming aware that these mills are quite, inappropriate and unkind, and then that's to the animals and the future owners both. But the more cities take what their jurisdiction is and put these ordinances forward, then it might have a domino effect with other adjoining communities. But we can only do what we can do here in the city of Bloomington, those who feel very strongly about humane conditions for our beloved pets.
Thank you.
Councilmember, go ahead. Councilmember Sims, was there a follow-up or?
No, I almost acted like the chair and almost called on Councilmember Piedmont Smith. I'm sorry, I just got ahead of myself.
The rock, paper, scissors didn't work, did it? Councilmember Flaherty and then Councilmember Piedmont Smith, or?
Oh, I wanted to
You want to
respond.
respond?
Yes.
Oh, okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think I agree with Councilmember Sandberg, and I think that Councilmember Sims raised a very good question. And we don't want to just force business or to even have the perception that, oh, now I have to move outside of Bloomington city limits. I'm intending to speak with our colleagues in the county commissioners board and see if they might extend such a prohibition throughout the county. Now that's probably as much as we could do. We are residents of the county and constituents of county government, just like people outside the city limits are. So we do have an impact in that way. But as far as Greene County, Owen County, the others, I don't know what we could do in that respect. But thank you, it was a good point.
Oh, thank you for your answer. And I was just indicating possibly future conversations in that regard. So thank you for your answer.
Councilmember Flaherty?
Yes, thank you. So I'll start by noting that I 100% share the goal of A, humane treatment of animals, and B, putting all puppy mills and kitten mills entirely into non-existence. I'm wondering more specifically about the research basis for the legislation. It seems like this is a national conversation playing out with players, including the Humane Society, as well as the Pet Industry Joint Advisory Council, who we got a letter from, as well as the American Kennel Club and others who sort of stake different positions on this, all of whom have, some interest of some kind, and that's fine. But when we ban things, sometimes there are spillover effects of various types, whether it's displacing the activity elsewhere or simply driving activity underground. So again, I don't know the politics and vested interests of the Pet Industry Joint Advisory Council, for instance, but they referenced in some sort of time comparison in California after a ban went into a place, significant increase in puppy scams of some kind. And I'm wondering if we're driving activity, like if it's worse to ban than to effectively regulate, I guess is the question. And I'm wondering specifically what research basis we have to compare those things with regard to their impact on puppy mills to reach the desired goal that all of us share. Could I speak to that?
Would the sponsors like to speak to it, or Ms. Morton? Let's start with Councilmember Sandberg.
We basically were contacted by local individuals to get the ball rolling on this ordinance. And when we did run it by our own animal care and control department, we got full appreciation for what it was we were attempting to do. It recently was unanimously approved by what is called the Animal Control Commission, who welcomed this because apparently this is something locally that many actively involved residents of Bloomington have wanted to see happen for a long time and just weren't able to get quite the foothold into it. So even though this is national, certainly in the amount of research that Ms. Morton helped us with and others in our local community, but we got quite a bit of support from people who have been urging us all along to move this forward to an actual ban rather than to try to merely regulate it.
If I could just clarify, and thank you, Councilmember Sandberg. My concern is not that I would like to ban the existence of puppy mills. My concern is that banning pet store sales of animals is not going to accomplish that, and in fact may exacerbate those things in some ways. So that's the question: is specifically comparative research, like quantitative metrics of different places that have enacted bans or not, and looking at pre and post numbers of how this has impacted illegal sales of animals, for instance, unregulated sales, or other sort of metrics that I think are relevant to this conversation of like the overall goal of increasing animal welfare. And I'll continue to do research. It's okay if folks don't have hard numbers on that. I'm just curious if they're. work.
Councilmember Rallo.
Well, just to observe that I agree with Councilmember Flaherty that generally speaking, when you enact some prohibition, you drive the activity underground. But in this case, one can find a cat or a dog at the local pounds or animal care and control, or you can find them through animal breeders, and so the activity of finding a dog or a cat is still will be very much, I think, successful, but it will be routed to those avenues. That's all.
Additional questions from council? Okay, seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Flaherty.
My blurry hand. I have one more.
Blurry hand, sorry.
I still trying to unpack some of this. I think it's almost certainly true that there are pet stores who sell animals from puppy mills and kitten mills. I guess my question though is the premise seems to be that risk is great enough that we should ban the activity entirely, versus the idea that like, is there a such thing as responsible sale of pets at a pet store? I guess is my question. Yeah, feel free.
Councilmember Sandberg, and I believe Ms. Morton wanted to respond as well.
I would just defer that to Ms. Morton.
Ms. Morton, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Flaherty, I'd like to respond to your question. So we know that most animals that are sold in pet stores are coming from puppy and kitten mills, because responsible breeders, they want to meet the family who's going to be adopting the animals that they have raised. They will often allow the family to come to their home or to where they're raising the animals to meet the parent dogs. So we know that that's the way that responsible breeders operate. Whereas these pet stores are operating, working with these puppy mills, it's very high volume. So they can have a variety of breeds stocked in their store. If you're working with a local breeder who specializes in a particular breed, maybe like a purebred poodle, they can, like I said, you can meet the parents of the dog and you'll see where they're living, and that provides the disconnect between the pet store, which is the middleman. The consumer has no way to verify really truly where that puppy is coming from. But if they're working with a responsible breeder, they're able to do that.
Thank you. And just to follow up and clarify, so is it accurate then to state that the position of the Humane Society is that it's not possible to have appropriately regulated pet store sales of pets? Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosenberger.
Thanks. I wanted to ask about the adoption piece in this. So I think this ordinance is saying a pet shop can host adoption, like parties or whatever time with rescue organizations nearby, and that they can't take any proceeds from that. I think, hosting rescue events is great wherever they can happen. And is that the norm, that the pet store can't share in any of those profits? I mean, I understand the point is trying to not have, I think Councilmember Fremont Smith said, not sneaking in puppy mill dogs, but I guess I'm just trying to think futuristically or something, would it not make sense sort of for a nonprofit rescue to also be a pet store to buy dog food, and I don't know, some kind of hybrid that's still for the good of rescue pets? So just wondering about that in the ordinance, if that is normal, or if we would want to kind of look at what also might be possible there.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Well, again, I might defer to Ms. Morton for a more thorough answer to that. But typically, one of the attractions of a pet shop are the dogs and the cats that are on display that bring the families and the children in. And so part of a model of helping to bridge what is currently allowable and what now would not be was to kind of bridge that. If you want to showcase animals to be that attractor, to bring people into your store, you could partner with other rescue or sheltering organizations to do that. That's not saying that they would be required to, but that's something they could do if they wanted to just, again, collaborate with those adoption organizations. And again, if anyone else has anything more to add to that.
Ms. Morton?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councilmember Sandberg. I would just like to piggyback a little bit off of that. So we know that the most successful pet stores, including 3 in Bloomington, do not sell dogs or cats, period. They know that the most successful pet stores have a $103 billion industry that includes supplies, food, toys, grooming. I mean, for any of you who have pets, you know how expensive they can be. And so they bring us a lot of joy, but people like to spend money on their pets. And so it's a lucrative business, and it really makes a lot of business sense to host events that attract those consumers into the stores. I'll also say, I think generally there's been some issues with loopholes in other jurisdictions across the country where they're allowing rescues maybe or pet stores to sell animals. And so it causes some quote unquote sham rescues to pop up selling these dogs. And so I think we found it to be a more clean method for the store to not exchange any money for the animals, just to offer the space. And again, many stores will want to do this on their own because they know it is a really great way to attract business and customers into their store.
Thank you. Additional questions? Okay. Seeing none, let's go to the public for comment. I see several raised hands already. But if you would like to offer comment and you haven't done so already, please use the raise hand function in Zoom or type a message into chat. And our meeting host, Mr. Lucas, will say that. Also, if you are contacting us through a cell phone, *9 should get you to us. And always, if there is more than one individual on a single device, please let us know that so we can make sure that each person has enough time to comment. Mr. Lucas, I'm seeing 7 commenters. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes, and I believe we may have 1 or 2 that would like to comment through chat. So I see 7 raised hands at the moment.
Okay. Let's do 3 minutes each. Are there any objections to that from council members? And again, keeping in mind that we'll have another opportunity to receive comment next week. Okay, let's go ahead. Mr. Lucas, who's first?
First up is the screen name Leslie Henderson Miller, and I apologize. I know that's not your real name, but I didn't catch it the first time around. But you are up first and should be able to unmute now.
And welcome. Please go ahead and introduce yourself, your full name, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Karen Kidwell, and I started this store about 40 years ago. And I gave it to my daughter a few years ago, and she runs it now. We, to start with, would like to invite any of you that would like to come down and see our store. I don't think any of you have been in here, including the lady from the shelter, the society there. One of the things that's always happened in here in our stores, we try to educate the customers, because what we see missing so much from the equation is the fact that if you don't have decent information to work with, you're not going to do too good a job as an owner. And so we spend hours of time on doing that. Our puppies have never been on graded floors in that many years. We've always tried to treat our customers right, and we don't buy from growers. We do that because we don't want to buy from customers. Incidentally, while I'm thinking about it, you guys didn't notify us at all. But I would like for you to talk to some of our customers over time. We've encouraged come in and play. We never try to sell them anything, but they miss their animals, and they've helped us with socialization and what have you while the animals are here. I've got some other people in my group that would really like to speak.
Ms. Kidwell, you're cutting in and out for me. I don't know if that's happening for anyone else. Okay. And did you say you have other individuals who'd like to speak on this device?
Yes, some of my staff is here and they'd like to speak.
Okay, and how many individuals do you have there?
4.
Okay. Mr. Lucas, should we go to another one and then rotate back to this? What would you recommend?
It's up to the chair. It might be just as easy to have them go one at a time if they're on the same device.
Why don't we do that? So Ms. Kidwell, if you could hand over the phone to the next person.
Hi, my name is Leslie Henderson Miller, and that was my mother. The most important thing we think that you all don't understand is that the socialization of the puppy when it's little is very important. And we try right here in our store to socialize the community and bring them in and love on the animals that we have here. Mom told you all the things that she thought was very important. But the thing is if we've been here 45 years and we've always had a clean checkup from the shelter and nobody to say anything bad about any of the things we've done, that ought to be something that you take and factor, that not all people or places are created equal. There are some good places that have local raised animals to love, and don't push them on people to sell them. Don't elevate the prices just because it's a male or a female. It's about a living soul, and that baby is going to be with you for a very long time. And that's an important thing to share with that family, not that it's just a cute little soul and you need to take something home. Not every pet store is bad, and just it's like collateral damage. You shouldn't throw everybody under the bus. I can give you to somebody else right now.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson Miller.
Hello.
And who do we have? Hello. You'll have 3 minutes. Please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Okay. My name is Dorothy Powers, but I go by Dottie. And I have worked with Delilah's for over 20 years. My mom did it and I do it. And we have located pups for them. We do not deal with the Amish. We deal with private people. We talk to those people. We make sure those puppies are 8 weeks old. We make sure they've had a first shot in worming before they come in. If they are a puppy that is prone to heart murmurs, we have had them checked out before we purchase them to have them in the shop. And I go all over. I have a lot of friends. I was a breeder years ago out of Vigo County, and I have a lot of connections of people that raise dogs. I also deal with some elderly people that their dogs had puppies and they want to get it spaded, and the pet store has purchased these puppies and for ways for them to have money to get their dogs spaded. I have also dealt with rescues. I have had people come in here to the shop that their elderly person has been in a nursing home dying and they can't take care of their dogs. They've notified the shelter. They've not got no response. They come in here begging for somebody to find a place for them to go. I've dealt with a rescue. They told me, yes, they would take them. I have met them in Spencer. They have picked them out and got good homes. They've even sent me back pictures of where those dogs just went. That is what we do. We try to keep everything that is sold to this store out of the shelters and out of the rescues. There is a contract here that they sign. It states at any time, I don't care if that dog's 10, 12 years old, if you cannot keep it, it comes back to us. We relocate it in another home. We don't take it down to the shelter and drop it off, and we don't dump it along the side of the street. Now, This business has been here for years. Like I said, my mother started help finding them pups. She's a good friend of Karen's, and my mother is retired from it. She's in assisted living, and now I've took over trying to fill her shoes. And that's what we do here.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Is there another individual who'd like to offer comment?
Yes, my name is Lori Shields. I've worked with the company going on 8 years. 2 of my animals have come from Delilah's, and one of them is 15 years old and still doing great. And also it states in our contract that if we feel like a puppy is a smaller puppy, we recommend that they buy NutriCal, stuff like that. I personally will even give the people my personal information, my phone number, and tell them they can call me at any time if anything's going on with that puppy and they need help with it. They have my personal number to call me. Also, we keep about 150 or so kittens out of the shelter every year. We take them in and make sure they get their shots, their wormings, defleed, they're fed the best food possible. And so our kittens are adopted out and not in shelters. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. Is there anyone else on this device that would like to offer comment?
No, this is Karen again. I think all the girls have spoken. We've tried forever to be responsible, and I guess we kind of resent the fact that we're being treated like we aren't. We've never bought from puppy mills. I would be remiss if I told you I'd never gotten a puppy that perhaps hadn't been handled right, but that happened early on when I was in town, and we made sure it didn't happen again. And I don't know. I've had customers for years that have bought 2 or 3 dogs from me over a period of time, and I don't think a person can have a better friend than a good dog, an old person or a young person, either one. And I think you're doing some of us a disservice.
Thank you, Ms. Kidwell. Mr. Lucas, who do we have next?
Next is Sita Cohen.
Welcome. You'll have 3 minutes. Please confirm your name or introduce yourself, and then go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Sita Cohen, and I'm a member of the Animal Control Commission. I want to thank Council Members Sandberg, Rallo, and Piedmont Smith for introducing Ordinance 2145, which would phase out the sale of dogs and cats in pet stores, banning them beginning in January of 2023. This is such an important step in eliminating puppy and kitten mills, which we know can have horrible living conditions affecting the health and welfare of these animals in a very negative way. I want to thank the council for reviewing this ordinance and encourage you to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Mr. Lucas?
Next is Thomas Thompson.
Mr. Thompson, welcome. You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Thomas Thompson. My background in ethics comes from my 25 years experience in the field of addictions counseling. I've made presentations for ER staffs at hospitals, my own staff, and social workers involved with dysfunctional families. After my retirement, I joined the Delilah's Pet Shop staff and have been employed with Delilah's Pet Shop for about 8 years. And I assure you that I would not hold that position if there were even a scent of disreputable practices. If we want to destroy puppy mills, an excellent concept, we need to address that problem, but not at the expense of legitimate pet shops. Our animals come from breeders who want to advance the breed in popularity. And if we're curtailed, mills will assuredly find outlets more appealing than our ethical shop, and they will be more difficult to root out when they go underground. Although they don't come to our shop anyway, this ruling is harmful to all breeds of dogs. Please check with the inspectors who come and examine our hygiene, care and feeding of our animals, etc. Oh, and since this meeting has become public knowledge, Delilah's has been inundated with phone calls and emails in support. I would encourage the council to vote against this 2145, I believe it is. Again, it's just upsetting to be classed in with puppy mills when we fight so hard against them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Lucas?
Next is Kathy George.
Ms. George, welcome. You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Kathy George, and I've worked in rescue of dogs for many years now. Several years ago, I had an opportunity to work through a contact to pull Amish puppy mill dogs that were no longer bringing a profit to their owners. Once the female dog starts to have 3 or less puppies per litter, or their heat cycles start to slow down, the animals are no longer considered to be earning their food or keep, and they're usually destroyed to make room for a dog that can bring in more money via more or bigger litters. They live their lives in cages, often hidden away in barns built to house hundreds of dogs, and they're only handled by humans when they're being pulled for breeding, or if there is a nursery available, they're placed there with their puppies until the puppies are weaned at about 5 weeks of age, and then they're pulled from their mothers and sold. Cages with dogs in them can be power washed, which leads to the injury as the dogs are not removed prior to cleaning. I've taken dogs with their eyes out. Most dogs get minimal grooming. They're covered in mats, and they have timers controlling the lighting and the heat and air conditioning systems. And they live their entire lives in this confined system without any human interaction other than when they're being bred. This is until they're being pulled for disposal. And this is also done at the hands of the owners, and they are not an approved method by euthanasia by a vet. They're put down in other ways that are considered inhumane. These dogs do not receive routine vet care, nor is the breeding dog evaluated for genetic health issues that would prevent a reputable breeder from breeding to ensure only the best traits are carried on into future puppies. And I personally have taken in puppies with heart murmurs, orthopedic abnormalities such as hip dysplasia, patellar luxation, congenital limb deformities, and spinal disc disease, as well as neurology issues, including seizure disorders. These dogs often live a shortened lifespan in pain or compromise, and their owners are going to share the financial responsibility to care for their pet, or they will abandon them for a healthy dog at a later date. People who buy a pet as a puppy at a pet store do so in good faith, and they expect that puppy or kitten to be a healthy addition to their family and home. However, the public is not aware that the animal that they're getting ready to buy has come from a puppy mill. Puppy mills exist because the public is buying their litters from these stores. These animals are suffering because the public trusts what the store owners tell them. They do not expect to see their animals suffering from seizures or going lame due to the genetic complications. There's an organization called Bailing Out Benji. It's a volunteer group dedicated to stop puppy mills. And they last published a map of Indiana of the puppy mills in 2017.
Ms. George, you've used your 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for consideration. I'll stop.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lucas.
Next up is Elizabeth Orrick.
Ms. Orrick, welcome. You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Council President Sims and council members. My name is Elizabeth Orrick. I'm the National Manager of Puppy Mill Initiatives for Best Friends Animal Society. And I'm here on behalf of Best Friends and our thousands of Indiana members, supporters, and partners in support of the proposed Humane Pet Sales Ordinance. The fact is, puppy and kitten mills are in business to supply pet stores. Responsible breeders don't sell to pet stores because they don't sell to third parties and because it's not financially viable. And this pledge never to sell a puppy to a pet store can be found in every reputable breeder's code of ethics, including nearly all of the parent breed clubs of the American Kennel Club. And although the commercial breeders who do sell to pet stores may be regulated by the USDA, the federal care standards do not ensure quality breeding or a humane life for animals who we agree are living souls. For example, dogs are allowed to be confined to tiny wire cages that only need to be 6 inches larger than the dogs. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for their entire lives, forced to breed every cycle in order to produce as many puppies as possible. And these are the dogs producing puppies for local pet stores. The substandard breeding that occurs in these mostly out-of-state facilities that Bloomington has no way of regulating or inspecting, nor in fact is Indiana, means that unsuspecting buyers are often faced with a pet having physical, genetic, and psychological problems that can cause them to be surrendered to shelters when the emotional toll and the vet bills become insurmountable. So this is not just about protecting animals. It's about protecting consumers. It's not about shutting down businesses. It's about ensuring that Bloomington doesn't support a cruel industry driven by profit. It gives pet stores the opportunity to not support puppy and kitten mills, but rather to implement a more humane, business-friendly model that generates profit through sales of supplies and services, as thousands of successful pet stores across the country are currently doing. And certainly with the very generous implementation period included in the ordinance, there would be ample time for existing businesses to phase out the sale of dogs and cats. I'll say that I've worked on hundreds of these ordinances, and this is an unusually long implementation period. So preventing dog and cat sales would not prevent pet stores from doing business. It would not impact responsible breeders who could continue to sell directly to the public. And of course, it would not prevent anyone from adopting an animal from a shelter or rescue group. This would be a fair and effective way to prevent an endless supply of poorly bred pets from being imported into the community so that consumers are protected and fewer animals will have to suffer in order to supply the retail pet trade, and to relieve the burden on shelters and therefore the taxpayers who subsidize those shelters by getting companion animals out of those facilities and into retail settings where they have a greater chance of being adopted by the public. And that's why 415 cities, counties, states, including many in Indiana, have enacted these kinds of laws, and we hope Bloomington will join them. And we really appreciate your taking up this issue and your thoughtful consideration, and for giving me the opportunity to share our support with you. And if you'd allow me another 10 seconds, I'd just like to address Councilmember Flaherty's question about research and the comment about the California Humane Pet Sales Bill creating puppy selling scams. I worked on that bill and helped write the language and did a lot of the research. And the original bill, which was the first statewide humane pet sales bill, did have a loophole that created an opportunity for pet stores to source from sham rescues formed by out-of-state puppy mills. We fixed that by passing a stronger bill in California.
Thank you, Ms. Orrick. Ms. Orrick, if you'd like, if you could share that comment in writing, we will happily make sure every member of council gets that.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas?
Yes, next is Allison Jacobs.
Ms. Jacobs, welcome. You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead. And for those who haven't seen, there should be a timer that appears on your screen. So please do keep an eye on that. So.
Hi.
Go ahead. Welcome.
Allison Jacobs. Hi, sorry. My name is Allison Jacobs, and I'm here today on behalf of a local 501c3 I co-founded, and I'm serving as the secretary of the board. I'm an IU graduate with an ethics minor, and I own a pet-related local business. Our nonprofit rescue, Manor Mutts Rescue, just took in our second Delilah's Dog of the Year. I have him at my house right now in my lap. If you guys could see my video, you'd meet Pickles. Delilah stating that they will take a dog back at any time is untrue. We've taken in several dogs over the past 2 years that were originally purchased from Delilah's and Anthony's Pets. We live all homeless dogs and try to find them good homes, but we turn away countless owner surrender requests every week because we do not have the room. These store-bought pups are taking away our resources from our local shelters. They are filling our shelters. Delilah's and Anthony's Pets are contributing to the homeless pet population in Bloomington. The people whom surrendered these dogs to us would have never met our adoption criteria. Responsible breeders do not sell their dogs to pet stores to sell. We heard tonight from people that work at Delilah's that they admittingly purchase their dogs from backyard breeders, which is essentially the same thing as purchasing from a puppy mill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Mr. Lucas?
Next is Anthony Taboas.
Mr. Taboas?
Mispronouncing that.
Mr. Taboas, please correct us on the pronunciation too. And welcome, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Amazingly enough, there's no correction needed. He nailed it. First thing I'd like to say is I think everybody here is an animal lover. I don't think anybody would be here if they weren't. It's just kind of why we all got into this job. I started doing this in '91. We learn from our mistakes. I've shifted my business model many times to try to avoid mills. That's why I don't deal with brokers anymore. Nobody brings dogs to my store. I go out, I visit, I see breeders on site. I know several of the things that I've read recently indicate how people deceive the pet store. You can't really deceive me when I'm there. I'm on site. If I see anything even remotely like the picture early on in the slide presentation earlier, one, there's no way I buy from there. Two, I never have seen anything like that, but if I did, I would have to try to figure out what I was going to do because my conscience wouldn't let me deal with a person like that or even consider them. They should go away. All puppy mills should absolutely go away. It's been stated repeatedly, and it is so true. This bill doesn't really achieve those objectives. It talks about closing a store, changing supply and demand. Much as Councilman Flannery said earlier, things just shift. I think you were referencing earlier my possibility of being forced to extend my stay in the business. I have 6 months more than the proposed grace period. My catch is I have no real way to fund those 6 months, which would force me to then roll my lease into a longer lease with my landlord somewhere else. That is so not my goal. I'm ready to retire and I would like to do that. But if the bill goes through as is without some sort of grandfathering, short extension, I will probably monetarily have no issue. My small store isn't viable for going to completely based on just supplies. It just won't work. It's too small, too much money in a mall. I wish it was different, but I would be forced to change things up. I would much rather get grandfathered in for a short period of time. I think your goals are good, even if I don't think the nail's being hit on the head. And the difference between a year or a year and 6 months, when we're talking about perpetuity, is an incredibly minor one. I don't really have anything else to say except thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Tabellis. Mr. Lucas, who do we have next?
Next, I believe, is Kathy Egan.
Ms. Egan, welcome. You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead. Is Ms. Egan unmuted?
Let's try that again.
Ms. Egan?
It looks like she's unmuted, but we're not hearing her audio. I don't know if she could try to log out and log back in. Sometimes that corrects it, and we could come back to her.
Okay, let's come back to Ms. Egan. Who would we have next?
Next is Linda Lawson.
Ms. Lawson, welcome. You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for your time. This is something that I believe that I emailed everyone that's on the town council that has a concern or a question about puppy mills or about puppies ending up in, or cats for that matter, ending up in pet stores. My experience is that as a state legislator, I carried the first puppy mill bill and visited puppy mills and pretty much saw firsthand exactly how these dogs are raised and see what it's like for the mothers of these pups that come from the mills and how the moms especially are treated and never leaving a cage and having their pups taken away at 5 weeks old only to get impregnated the next time they go into a heat session. And then this just continues to go on and on. I will tell you today that myself and Kathy Egan spent our day 8 hours in a vehicle transporting dogs and cats to Northwest Indiana only because we have a huge abundance of dogs and cats in the state of Indiana who need to be spayed, who need to be neutered, and have no place to live. My suggestion is that pet stores start taking some of these dogs that go without homes and go without families and start selling them in a pet store, as opposed to not having homes, not having a place to go to. There's not a shelter in the state of Indiana that's not bursting at the seams this very minute. And I don't know what the reasons are, whether it's COVID, whether it's family surrender, whatever it is, but we have thousands of dogs in the state of Indiana that do not have homes right now. And to think that we are not spaying and neutering, to think that we are bringing more puppies into this world that do not have the resources they need to live past their first birthday is absolutely crazy as a state. I admire the fact that Bloomington is taking this on as an issue. Coming from Northwest Indiana, I just moved here 3 years ago, but I will tell you, because of the state laws being passed by Illinois and the city of Chicago, that the community that I came from, Hammond, Indiana, now has an enormous pet store, but they're filled with nothing but dogs and cats from puppy mills. And the reason that's happening is because the ordinance that had been passed in Illinois and in Chicago. And so they're driving these businesses, if you will, into the state of Indiana. So there may be 2 pet stores in Bloomington right now, but I guarantee there's going to be a lot more soon. And with Illinois, the decisions and the programs that they have put in place.
Yes, Lawson, that's your 3 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Hi, this is Kathy Egan. I'm having to use Linda Lawson's computer, so when you're ready, just let me know.
Okay, why don't we come back to Ms. Egan? Ms. Egan, please go ahead. 3 minutes. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm the founder and the director of the Canine Express Transport Project, which is a 501c3 registered organization. I transport dogs and cats from area shelters. To date, since the project began in 2004, we've transported 12,300 shelter dogs from our area and over 733 cats from our shelters in our area to our shelter partners in New England and Cleveland in northern Indiana. So we are spinning our wheels, per se, for hours and hours and hours to get these dogs and cats out of our area to safe places, to shelters where they can be adopted. So my question back to Delilah's pet store is, where are you getting your shelter animals? You didn't say where. You used to have shelter dogs and cats that were in your store, but I haven't seen that for a long time. I go to Specs in Columbus, which is a very profitable pet store in our area in Indianapolis, and they do not sell animals. They work with rescue groups. It's a very profitable business for them. Also, I did not hear if cats and dogs at pet stores in our area were spay and neutered, and that is causing a huge problem. They don't have to follow the recently passed spay neuter bill that Linda Lawson authored, and it was passed into law. Also, do they take animals back again? If there is an issue with a particular animal, I know Delilah said they do, but I can almost guarantee that Anthony's pet store, when a dog or cat gets to be 1 year old and there's a behavior problem, they would not take them back in again. Therefore, that's why we need the rescue groups and the shelters to be engaging the public into adopting from them at the shelter, at pet stores, because they can follow that animal, whether they're a puppy and they have problems that the people have to relinquish them, or if they're 1 or 2 years old and they're having problems where they can't keep the animal, where they have a safe place to come back to. And these are successful models around the country with shelters and letting pet stores sell their paraphernalia for the animals, and letting the rescue groups and the shelters do their job that they've been trained to do adoptions. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Egan. Mr. Lucas?
Next is Allison Zook.
Ms. Zook, welcome. You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Allison Zook and I run the Ranch Cat Rescue here in Bloomington. I'm going to start by saying thank you. I appreciate all of your cats that have made their video appearances tonight. I'm here as your resident cat lady. We've heard a lot about puppy mills and, you know, as Samantha Morton mentioned, while kitten mills are not as prevalent, they do exist and it's under, you know, those same terribly inhumane conditions. I feel like I'm just going to reiterate so many great points that a lot of folks have made. But as a rescue, I take an issue with any sort of commercialization of animals, right? Especially with mills where folks don't know where your animal is coming from, the conditions it's endured, you know, everything that it's been through. There's so many pets that already need homes. Any rescue, any shelter. I don't know if there's anybody from BACC here. You know, we're all overflowing with animals here in Bloomington. You know, as Allison with Maynard Mutz mentioned, in the cat world, you see a disproportionate higher number of cats than dogs that are stray, that are euthanized, that end up in, you know, kind of an unfortunate, terrible situation, either in the wild, spreading diseases, places where they just can't be housed and controlled. Under the national motto that Petco and PetSmart have, you know, where they do shelter animals and bringing those into stores, that, you know, can be a huge difference with shelters and with rescues to help us save animals and get more moving through. I know a lot of the volunteers for rescues are the ones to help staff those stores, those animals, to scoop litter boxes and to help socialize the cats to kind of offset some of that labor burden, since it's not as high of a cost to pet stores. So I know that, you know, as rescues, we're very conscious of that. But ultimately, you know, I always want to push for, you know, the saving and the rescuing of animals that we currently have before we intentionally breed more just for store and sale. So again, you know, not only would this ordinance save the lives of puppy mill dogs, but it's going to alleviate suffering that we have in our community of the cats that are here. This is something I would love to see passed here in Bloomington. I'd love to be able to work with some of the local pet stores, talk to them about how as a rescue I can help provide some adoptable pets and help kind of remedy this. But I do hope the council will vote yes on this. And I thank you so much for hearing all of us this evening and for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Zook. Mr. Lucas, who do we have next?
Next is Ann Sterling.
Ms. Sterling, welcome.
Hi.
You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you to the council for considering this legislation. My name is Ann Sterling. I'm a resident of Sycamore Knolls here in Bloomington. So especially thank you to Councilors Rollo, Piedmont Smith, and Sandberg for bringing forth this important legislation. I won't belabor any of the points that have been made. I am in full support of this legislation. And just as a reminder, for the reason I'm here personally is for the dogs who are in the mills. The reason we have hundreds of puppy mills in Indiana, over 300 puppy mills in Indiana, dogs who spend their entire lives in cages. They don't get to curl up at the end of the bed on a rainy night like this. Their entire existence is confined in a cage. They're not companion animals. They're breeding machines. It's sort of like a factory farm for pets. That's not what we want to be part of here in Bloomington. We have an opportunity to say that this is not something our community supports. This isn't something pet lovers in Bloomington want to have a part of. The reason those dogs are trapped in mills their entire lives is because of the pet store industry. That's where they're going, right? That's why they have to stay in the mills. They're going to the pet store industry. So by passing this ordinance, we have a chance to do our part in Bloomington to help our state be a better state. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Sterling. Mr. Lucas, who do we have next?
Next is Rachel DiGregorio. Excuse me.
Ms. DiGregorio, welcome. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. And you did pronounce it correctly. First of all, I would like to thank the council and everyone that has attended. And so many of us have worked hard to bring this to your attention, and we're grateful for your support. So many other people before me have mentioned the inhumane conditions of the mills, but I would like to speak about the adult dogs that never see the light of day and are literally bred until they're no longer viable. After that, they're disposed of by death or abandonment. And we're not talking about euthanasia, as somebody mentioned. These are not good ways to put dogs down, but many country roads have been the end of the line for female dogs who have birthed hundreds of puppies, all for profits. And working in senior dog rescue, Silver Linings Rescue is the rescue I am with. I've seen the results of an overbred mother, as well as puppies who grow into senior dogs with genetic disorders. It's time we end the sale of puppies and kittens that have been bred in these horrible conditions. And as has been previously mentioned, responsible breeders are the exact opposite of this. They don't breed dogs with genetic disorders, and they're always there for new owners. And some even set online groups up so families can share updates on the litter mates. They never sell to pet stores, instead choosing to meet their potential families in their homes where they can meet the parents. I feel pet stores have a responsibility to provide education, food, and supplies to make sure all pets in our community are cared for. By working with local organizations like the City of Bloomington Animal Care and Control, having foster animals in their store and hosting adoption events, I believe they can transition to a more responsible model. The animals deserve it, and Monroe County will be following dozens of other counties across the country that have shown compassion for animals. I think we all agree that we as a community don't like to see this kind of thing. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeGregorio. Sorry. So, Mr. Lucas?
Yes, I believe T&T Pet would like to comment, and they should now be able to unmute.
Welcome. If you would, please introduce yourself and share your name, and then you'll have 3 minutes. Is the person unmuted? It sounds, I'm not hearing anything.
They should be able to unmute. It doesn't look like they have unmuted themselves quite yet. Perhaps we can come back to them. I do see one hand raised ahead of them.
Let's come back to the T&T, and the additional comment is from?
Yes, Julie Gray.
Okay, Ms. Gray, welcome. You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm so pleased to be talking to you today, and I'm so grateful that Councilor Sandberg, Isabel Piedmont-Smith, and Dave Rallo are sponsoring this ordinance, which so many of us in the Bloomington rescue community have longed for years. There's a reason 400 communities across the nation have passed ordinances like this, and that is that responsible breeders simply do not place their animals for sale in a pet store. They don't. They lovingly bring up the animals. They want to meet the future owners. They do not delegate that important responsibility to someone else. I understand that the local pet stores believe they're doing their best to screen their breeders, but the fact is that there's all sorts of government regulatory agencies that are trying to work with these puppy mills, and they aren't able to deal with them or shut them down. So the idea that 2 local pet stores can regulate these breeders is just not going to work. What we need to do is have the puppies brought up and placed by either a responsible breeder, and that's why the local Bloomington Kennel Club supports this ordinance, because there are responsible breeders who raise dogs and cats, and there's no shortage of available dogs and cats. Also, animal shelters are exquisitely well qualified to care for puppies and dogs and kittens and their medical needs. They have veterinarians on staff. So whatever efforts these local pet stores may make, They are not experts. They're not qualified vets or vet techs. It's better in a world when there are so many animals needing homes, the best people to place those animals in homes are qualified, public-minded animal shelters and rescues and responsible breeders who have taken, in many cases, an industry oath to support their breed, to make sure to place their puppies and kittens in responsible homes. So please, on behalf of all of the animal lovers of Bloomington, let's pass this ordinance. The pet stores are going to be able to continue to do business. There's plenty of money to be made without selling animals. I think you're about to hear from T&T, which is a pet store that does exactly that. So thank you so much, and let's pass this.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Mr. Lucas, were we able to recapture the last comment, the commenter we missed?
Oh, I actually had missed a message from them indicating that they no longer wish to speak. So I think that's our last public comment at the moment.
Okay, let's give it another few moments to see if there are any additional hands. And again, if you'd like to offer comment, please use the raise hand function in Zoom. Or if you are on a cell phone, use *9. Please let us know if there are multiple people on a device so we can ensure that each person gets the appropriate amount of time. Is there anyone who has not commented yet who would like to offer comment? Mr. Lucas, anything?
I do see a hand raised, but I believe that attendee has commented already. And I don't see any additional hands raised at the moment.
Could you confirm with Mr. Thompson that it's not a different person on his device?
Yes, Mr. Thompson should be able to respond.
Yes, hello.
Mr. Thompson, we appreciate the comment you offered earlier. Is there a different person who would like to offer a comment now?
No, there is not.
Okay, thank you then. We'll move on to the next commenter. I saw a briefly raised hand.
Yes, looks like T&T Pet would like to comment after all, and they should now be able to unmute.
Welcome. If you would, please share your name, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Please go ahead.
So this is T&T Pet, and I think our primary...
And could you share your name, please, for the record?
Yeah. Sarah Howell on behalf of Terry Hayes with T&T Pet.
Thank you, Ms. Howell. Please go ahead.
And I think the primary thing we want to raise is Terry has been a successful independent retailer for 50 years, just selling pet goods, pet supplies, etc. But as of 2020, we added in the opportunity to adopt cats out from our store. At that time, adoptions are only going directly back to the shelter that the cat or animal comes from. And it's been very successful. In 2020, we adopted out 30+ animals from a shelter and returned the funds directly back to them. With that being said, it's been a great program that we're continuing to utilize. And want to make note that we think it's important when adopting animals out to utilize a contract in the adoption process that states the owner of the animal, essentially the parameters that the animal is going to be living in, if the home is owned by the person that will be homing the animal, or if the home is going to be sublet from another contractor. And most importantly, ensuring that the person that is utilizing this contract is confident that if they are not going to be capable of taking good care of the animal, that they can return it to the entity they received it from. With that being said, in the last two and a half years that we have been doing this adoption program, we've received back 3 cats, 0 dogs. And we feel very confident that we've been able to rehome the cats that we have received to homes that have been successful. So I just want to make it very clear that there is the capacity to have a retail entity in Bloomington that functions as a small business and provides cat and dog feed without the sale of animals. Because animals—
Thank you, Ms. Howell. That's your 3 minutes. That's your 3 minutes. If you have additional comments, you're always welcome to share those in writing as well. So, and for anyone who would like to add comments, you are always welcome to email those or message the council office, council@bloomington.in.gov. Mr. Lucas, any additional commenters?
Not that I see at this time, no.
Okay. Give it just another moment, and then we'll come back to council. Okay, seeing no further public comment. Additional questions from council members? Or additional comments now from council members? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, I'd like to, my colleague said earlier, I'd like to thank Heather Lacey in the City Council office for all her hard work on this ordinance. And I'd like to thank everybody from the public who commented this evening. I want to emphasize that by bringing this legislation, we are not accusing the local pet shops who do sell cats and dogs of any bad behavior at all. We are just trying to cut off that pipeline between puppy and kitten mills and the public. And the logic is that if we eventually, more and more municipalities decide that their pet shops are not going to sell animals, then the puppy mills will not have a place to make a profit anymore. So that's the goal. And as we heard from several people who work in animal rescue, there are plenty of animals that need good homes through rescue organizations and through our animal shelter. So I really would like to move to that model where we have the opportunity to perhaps show animals at pet shops, but let's get the ones that are already existing to have good homes instead of supporting the breeding of additional animals. So thank you also to my colleagues for the good questions that were raised. I will try to reach out to Elizabeth Orrick again to get some more information about the California ordinance and its consequences. But overall, I remain convinced that this is a good ordinance to pass for the well-being of animals in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you. I too appreciate everyone who has come to speak this evening to offer their perspectives. I particularly like to hear from Ms. Lawson and Ms. Egan from their perspectives and what they have seen up close and personal and what's happening across the state of Indiana and what other states do that have an impact here. But I overall agree that the pet shops who are going to be most impacted should this pass, Delilah's and Anthony's. I agree with my colleague that we're not accusing them of acting in any inappropriate way. This is a matter that goes higher up to the issue of the mills, which we have heard are just unacceptable. That's not the way to do things. For those of us who own dogs and cats and love them and care for them, there are other models that can be adopted that we want to encourage here in Bloomington, and of course elsewhere too, by our example. But again, we only have jurisdiction here, and our intent, I do believe, is important. We've heard from enough members of our community that have prompted us to move ahead with this. And so I hope for council support of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Flaherty?
Yes, thank you to the sponsors for bringing this ordinance, and thanks to all the members of the public who heard from tonight. I'm going to abstain this evening, still researching and sort of as a matter of due diligence. I'll reiterate that I 100% agree with the goal of eliminating puppy mills. I've heard a lot of horrible things from members of the public about those mills, which of course track with what I think we all think of that practice. But I think I still want to see the data-driven case for this being the most effective tool. And I want to continue to explore the idea that was shared from the representative from the Humane Society, that it is not possible for a pet store to ethically sell a pet, full stop. Because there's definitely prominent folks, including the American Kennel Club, for instance, the AKC. I know that it was mentioned the Bloomington chapter supports this ordinance, but the AKC generally opposes these ordinances. Not that the AKC is the authority on animal welfare by any means, but I think they do care in this space. So again, I want to be very careful that if we're going to ban something because a bad practice is prevalent, that we're not creating some unintended consequences. So again, as a matter of due diligence, I'll be speaking with the couple of local pet store owners and continuing to research and talk to folks with expertise in this space. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? And if not, I have a move to pass. Is there a second?
Second.
I think that was a muted second.
Second.
Okay. So, all right, I'm just going to go as I see folks on screen. Councilmember Sandberg?
Yes.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Rollo?
Yes.
Councilmember Sims?
Yes.
Councilmember Flaherty?
Abstain.
Councilmember Volin?
Abstain.
And Councilmember Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Okay, so I have that 602. Did I miss anyone? Okay, so I have that as
your vote, Councilmember Scambalori.
Oh,
I didn't hear.
I vote yes, so that would be 702. So sorry. Thank you very much. With that, I happily return the gavel to Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you very much, Councilmember Scambalori. The next item on our agenda is Appropriation Ordinance 2105, the end of year appropriation ordinance that has a lot of details in it. And so I will ask Controller Jeff Underwood to take us through it.
Good evening. I'm glad that I can be the one that puts you all to sleep tonight. So I think you'll have any trouble. I'm going to share my screen and run through the memo that was included, but that way folks can see it. So I will try that now. And I want to go to maybe. And of course, it didn't like that. Give me just a minute.
You're helping me with my Zoom meeting bingo, Mr. Underwood.
All right. Yeah. I'll do everything that I can. Let's see, slideshow from the beginning. There. Can we see it?
No.
Okay, I think I have to go back here and say share the screen. And we're going to share this. Share.
There you go.
Here and go from the beginning. There. How's that?
Perfect.
All right. Appropriation Ordinance 2105 is our comprehensive year-end appropriation. The total appropriation is $2,241,274. This request covers 10 funds, of which only 5 funds are needing additional funds. The other 5 funds only request moving funds between major categories. In addition, as noted, we added the language to appropriate the solar refunding bonds in the amount of $13,100,000. So the combined appropriation is $15,341,274, which I think is probably a record for an additional appropriation. Moving into the general fund, there are various departments. The majority of this ordinance transfers appropriation between departments and categories in order to cover changes between the initial prepared budget and actual operational results. Unlike previous years, the gross request from the general fund is $1,732,862. However, we'll be receiving a total of $1,150,921 in reimbursements. That's broken down into $1,050,000 in TIF funding to reimburse for road improvement costs in the engineering department, $16,000 in fees for a conference that was hosted by the police department, $84,921 from Bloomington Transit to cost share on the bus shelter improvement program. In addition, as we normally do at this time, we move money from the rental inspection fund. And in this case, it's the amount of $300,000. So adding those all together and subtracting it from the $1,732,000, our total net request impact is a use of $281,940. And that comes from the cash balance in the general fund. The bulk of this request can be looked at in the fire department to cover wages and benefits related to the fire union contract that was ratified after the budget improved. And as always, this ordinance will have no fiscal impact on the city's property tax rate. I'm going to run through each of the departments that have a request in here. Animal care, the Public Works Department is requesting a transfer of $7,000 from classification 2 supplies and a $4,500 transfer from classification 3 services to classification 1 personnel services. This will assist in covering for higher than anticipated temporary salaries and wages for staff absences and overtime, so net impact of 0. Public Works Administration, Public Works is requesting a $55,000 transfer from classification 3 services to classification 4 capital and an additional appropriation of $129,921 to capital to assist in covering costs related to the transit bus stop project and additional sidewalk repairs. And again, $84,921 of that is being reimbursed by the transit department. Housing and Neighborhood Development Hand is requesting $14,000 transfer from classification 3 services to classification 1 personnel services to cover additional wages and benefits due to allocations between general fund and grants, as well as the payment of accumulated leave. That says for the Corporation Council, but actually for not for the Corporation Council. I was channeling another department for the department director that left earlier, and that would be paid out in accordance with city policy. The surplus funds are due to reductions in training costs related to COVID-19. And as I said, the additional appropriation is due to the allocations between the general fund grants as well as the accumulated leave. And I'll say on this that we estimate each year for housing and neighborhood development, they have a number of grant funds as well. And we work with the department to try and allocate the personnel costs between grants and the general fund. And sometimes we don't quite make it. So this was a case where we were a little bit short. The clerk's office is releasing $5,000 in classification 3, and that is printing services requests were not quite as high. Community and Family Resources is requesting a release of $91,500 in classification 1. That's due to several vacancies during the year and a release of $5,000 from classification 3 due to less travel by staff due to COVID-19. And you'll see that as kind of a recurring fee in a lot of the departments that are releasing funds because they went virtual or they just couldn't travel. So Common Council is releasing $13,000 from classification 3 services, and this is due to not needing to utilize ASL services due to meetings being conducted virtually. Our office, the Controller's Office, is requesting a release of $95,000 in classification 1, and that's due to a couple of vacancies that I am happy to say did get filled, but we're halfway through the year before we got those filled, and $114,022 in classification 3, services due to savings from project management needs due to COVID-19, so programs didn't ramp up as virtually as possible. Economic and Sustainable Development Department is requesting release of $40,700 from classification 1. That's again due to several vacancies. $5,000 from classification 2 due to reduced needs related to supplies needed for programs that were provided virtually, and a release of $3,000 from classification 3 due to less travel. The Fire Department, as I said, is the big one. Additional appropriation of $550,000 in classification 1, and again, that's related to the union contract that was ratified after the budget was approved, so those additional funds weren't known and not added. And then $100,000 in classification 3 services to cover part of the cost related to the cleanup in regards to the voluntary burn. I will say that we did talk to the chief, and he believes that the additional cost, which we believe are estimated to be about $18,000, that they'll have sufficient funds to cover that, hence only the $100,000. Legal Department requesting additional appropriation of $4,000 in classification 1, and in this case is to cover costs related to the payment of accumulated leave for corporation counsel, again in accordance with city policy. An additional appropriation of $250,000 in classification 3 services to cover outside counsel costs related to annexation that was obviously not included in the 2021 budget. Mayor's office is requesting a $25,000 transfer from classification 3 classification 1, also requesting an additional appropriation of $6,000 due to payouts of accumulated leave for 2 positions in that office, as well as an additional appropriation of $2,500 in classification 2 supplies, provide for funding for additional supplies to cover COVID-19 expenditures. Police Department is requesting a $30,000 transfer from classification 1 classification 2 supplies to cover costs related to higher fuel costs, and a transfer of $208,000 from classification 3 to cover cover costs related to the conference. $16,000 is going to offset that, higher insurance premiums, and obviously unbudgeted repairs for flooding in the building, and the surplus in the classification 1 are due to vacancies during the year. Human Resources Department is requesting a transfer of $70,000 from classification 1 personnel services to classification 3, and an additional appropriation of $88,60 for classification 3 services to cover costs related to the Center for Equity and Inclusion for the anti-racism training program. It was not included in the 2021 budget. The surplus funds in classification 1 again are due to vacancies during the year. Information Technology is requesting a release of $70,000 in classification 1, again due to the vacancies, and $10,000 in classification 2, less training related costs due to COVID. This release will help with other departments. Engineering Department is requesting a transfer of $7,500 from classification 2 to classification 1, and an additional appropriation of $29,500 to cover costs related to differences in budgeted salaries and actual salaries paid, as well as cost sharing the office manager with the Planning and Transportation Department. The surplus funds in classification 2 related to reduced training costs. In addition, here's the $1,050,000 in classification 3 related to road improvement repairs. And as noted earlier, these funds will be reimbursed by TIF funding. I'll just note here, that typically, when there's a cost share and it's a TIF program, it would be paid directly from TIF funds. But in this particular case, this is related to right-of-way acquisition and some other costs, which the state dictates we have to use the Public Works Engineering Department funds to do that, even though it's going to get reimbursed by TIF. So the need to appropriate those funds so they can spend them, but it gets reimbursed. So it's a net of 0 in this particular case. Planning and Transportation requesting a release of 87.5 from classification 1 due to vacancies during the year, and a release of 4,200 from classification 2 and 22,100 from classification 3. This was a release of funds mainly due to reduction in use of supplies, along with travel and training due to COVID. That is all of the departments in the general fund. And now moving on to the other funds that had requests. In the Public Safety Local Income Tax Fund, the Police Department is requesting a $45,000 transfer of funds from classification 4 capital, classification 2 supplies. And this is helping as well for repairs to the building. And the surplus is due not buying capital equipment, but the training simulator. There was a savings if we paid for that all in 1 year. So it was paid for out of the previous year that freed up second year payments. So they were able to make that transfer. Public Safety Income Tax Fund, the Central Dispatch Department is requesting $15,000 from classification 1 personnel services, classification 3 to cover increased costs related to applicant recruiting and testing. So again, it's due to vacancies. So they're trying to attract people, and there's additional costs related to that. So we're just moving that on for them. Food and Beverage Fund, Economic and Sustainability Department requesting additional appropriation of $122,500 for classification 3. And this is really to cover costs associated with recovered forward loans. So when they added them all up, we ended up being a little bit over than what we originally thought. But again, these costs will be recovered in future years as repayments are completed. And these are low interest loans, but they are intended to be recovered. Parks General Fund, Parks is requesting a transfer of $60,000 from classification 1 to classification 2, and a transfer of $75,000 from classification 1 to classification 3. And this is due to several things. Obviously, if you've seen the cost of goods and materials have increased dramatically during the pandemic, and Parks Department is a big user of goods and materials. So they've seen a big increase, as well as bringing on Switchyard Park and increased costs again due to COVID for bringing a brand new park online. And as they get through a trial run of what's it going to take to run that park. And in addition, you'll see this in a few other departments. Increased insurance premiums, because a lot of times we get that information after the budget's been completed and insurance premiums have been going up. Alternative Transportation Fund, Parking Services Department is requesting a transfer of $2,100 from classification 2 to classification 1 to cover actual wages, which were slightly higher than budgeted. The Motor Vehicle Highway Fund, Street Division is requesting additional appropriation of $39,074 for classification 3. And again, this was related to higher than budgeted insurance premiums. Solid Waste, the Sanitation Division is requesting an additional appropriation of $46,839 for classification 3, related to a couple of things: increase in solid waste and recycling fees and insurance premiums, and there's no fiscal impact. The request is additional funds that have been previously budgeted for in the general fund department. So it just increases their budget, but it'll increase the transfer over. The Cumulative Capital Development Fund, Public Works is requesting a transfer of $50,000 from classification 2 supplies, classification 3 services, and a transfer of $146,633 from classification 2 to classification 4. And this is to accommodate the contracting of companies to provide services related to the removal of sidewalk trip hazards and providing matching funds to the 2021 NDOT Community Crossings Grant. Police Pension Fund, a big transfer of $10 from classification 3 to classification 1, and this is just due to covering personnel costs and due to rounding over. And then the final two, as we usually do, in 2012, state legislature created new rules regarding rental inspection programs, and it requires the city to deposit the receipts from the program into the designated fund. And then we're allowed to move that over into the department where the expenses are actually incurred, which in this case is the Housing and Neighborhood Development Fund out of the general fund. So as of September 30th, that fund had collected approximately $300,000 for the prior 11 months. And so we're requesting to move that over. And it's a part of that net appropriation. So this will be a positive impact on the general fund. And then finally, the Controller's Office is requesting the appropriation of $100,000 bond proceeds for the purpose of providing funds to pay the cost of refund and repay the 2017 lease, including related costs and the cost of issuing the refunding bonds. So this was the amendment that we passed earlier tonight to strike that language out of that ordinance and place it into this one. I will note that on December 1st, that will also be our public hearing that will be duly advertised. And that advertisement has been forwarded to the paper and should run this coming Sunday in the required 10 days before the public meeting. And with that, thank you for your consideration of the request. As always, started by saying I want to thank staff and all the department heads that help us put this together and have been very cognizant of their spending and spending it wisely as they always do. And our ability to keep the request for additional funds down as much as possible. So thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. If you could unshare, there we go. I can see my colleagues. So what questions do we have for Mr. Underwood on appropriation ordinance? What was it again? 2105. Any questions? Well, I have some if nobody else wants to jump in. On the food and beverage fund, appropriation of $122,500, is that we have a food and beverage commission that oversees that fund, right? Do we need to ask permission from them, or how does that work?
No, this is just an additional appropriation. The funding request for that program went to them. So I don't believe, I think Larry Allen's still on the phone call with us, but I don't believe we have to go back since the program was approved. And I think we're still under the maximum amount in total. But
exactly correct. Yeah.
Okay, so the program of the Recover Forward grants was approved for a maximum amount, and we're still under that amount. And so we can still claim this 122,000. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any questions now from my colleagues? I have more. So the another fund where an additional appropriation was requested was the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund, $39,000. So where does that money come from? Like, I mean, we're additionally appropriating from where?
It comes out of the, I should have, thank you for that question, because I made a note and then I didn't look at it as I was saying. Any of the additional appropriations come out of the available cash balance in that particular fund. So the 39,000, we have a sufficient funds cash balance in the MVH fund to appropriate that. All
right, good.
And that would be true for any of those. That was an actual. So the general fund, the 5 funds that had added money: sanitation, city general fund, MVH, rental inspection, and food and beverage. They all have sufficient cash balances to support those additional appropriations.
Okay, great. And then the solid waste fund for sanitation services, your memo says there's no fiscal impact due to this request. How is that calculated?
Yeah, so how that works, if you'll remember, when we do the budget, we bring two parts of that budget to you every year. The actual sanitation budget, which is the entire budget for the department, and that's paid for out of the sanitation fund. The revenues for that fund are a combination of all the fees for services that we collect. And then we budget an additional amount in the city's general fund that had been up to $1.6 million. What we do at the end of the year is we transfer only what is needed to bring that fund to zero. So we have sufficient general fund monies budgeted to transfer over, but because all the expenditures come out of the sanitation fund, we have to do an additional appropriation there, but it just means that'll be a part of that transfer from the city general fund at the end of the year. And we know that we have sufficient cash and budget appropriated to cover that.
So was there already a transfer?
No, no, it won't, we don't do the transfer from the general fund till we get down to the end of the year and know exactly how much we need to move.
So does that mean that there's only a $46,000 subsidy for sanitation this year?
No, no, no. We won't know at the end of the year. We know we need, for the entire budget for the department, we know we need an additional $40,000, 39 and change, to make the budget whole. We won't know what we need to move over from a cash perspective. So you got to remember, there's two different things. There's the budget, the spending plan. So how that's typically, I think around it's around $3 million in total, that budget. So this adds to that appropriated, what they're allowed to spend. Then what we see is, okay, what do they have to spend during the year? So say they need the 100% of their budget and they bring in $1.5 million in revenues. Then we would transfer $1.5 million out of that general fund appropriation over to make that fund come to zero.
Okay.
So
but this time you're only transferring 46K.
We're not even transferring it. We're just allowing them an additional appropriation to spend.
Oh.
Yeah. And then
okay.
In about a month, we'll start calculating what we think we need to move. And actually we do it as a part of our year-end close. We calculate, get everything paid for, we get the encumbrances accounted for, and we say, okay, here's the net transfer. And we make that as one of our final year-end transfers.
I see. It's the difference between budget and cash.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's just one of those weird ones, kind of like the rental inspection fund, where the money comes in and we have to put it in this fund, but then we can transfer it into the general fund to offset those costs. So.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Councilmember Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. And the question I'm going to ask you, and if it's apples and oranges or has nothing to do with this appropriation ordinance, just tell me that and I'll pursue it in different angles. But I'm thinking in terms of the costs that we've had with the controlled house burn. Last I heard, it was about 118,000. So is that part of this app or somewhere, or is apples and oranges, or should I continue?
No, absolutely is a part of this. And it was a last additional add. In fact, we waited to send you a revised ordinance until I'd had a chance to talk with the chief on Monday to make sure where we stood. The amounts that we have contracted for is a not to exceed $118,000. The chief believes at this point that will be sufficient for the city to complete its cleanup. We had originally estimated $100,000, and that's what I had in the ordinance, but I held it back, thanks to Stephen holding it and bargaining it for me, until I had an opportunity to talk with him to see if he believed that he had sufficient remaining funds in his budget. And after they reviewed it on Monday afternoon, he believes that they will. So we did not need to ask for the additional 18,000. So you will see in their request, there's 550,000 for category 1 that's related to the contract. there's $100,000 for classification 3 that's directly related to assisting to pay with those costs.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council members for Mr. Underwood? All right, seeing none, we will go to the public. If there's any member of the public who would like to comment on appropriation ordinance 2105, you can use the raise hand function in Zoom. And if that doesn't work, you can put in a chat message to the meeting host. Don't everybody jump up at once. Mr. Lucas, are you seeing anything?
I see no jumping up, no.
All right, we'll give it another moment. All right, seeing no public comment, we will come back to council members. Are there any final comments or follow-up questions? All right, well, I don't have, well, I guess I'll make one comment, and that is that Mr. Underwood, thank you for sending back my Excel spreadsheet. I will take a look at that and let you know if I have follow-up questions. Love that Excel spreadsheet stuff. I was doing it all day for my day job. All right, well, seeing no further comment, let's, do I have a do pass recommendation?
Move do pass.
Second.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Scamelluri.
Yes.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Sims.
Yes.
Councilmember Flaherty.
Yeah.
Councilmember Volan.
Yes.
Councilmember Rollo.
Yes.
And I also say yes. So that's a do pass recommendation of 800. Thank you, Mr. Underwood. And that concludes our business for this committee meeting.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you.
So we will see you in 2 weeks. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.